Chapter 185. Chloe grabbed the thick book on the chair next to her and shouted excitedly. Of course, it's those unpredictable spells. I read a book about bards during the day. It said that this profession's spell casting doesn't rely on intelligence, but on some kind of special characteristic flowing in the blood. Do you think I have the chance to become a bard? A bard? Andre was stunned for a moment. Then he looked up and down at the girl's temperament, and a thoughtful expression appeared on his face. Yes, after reading this book, I suddenly feel that I have the talent to become a bard. Chloe stroked her long black hair, and her eyes showed a trace of desire. She had liked all kinds of poems, stories, and legends since she was a child. She also hoped that one day she could experience a vigorous adventure like the main character in the story, and then obtain a sweet love. Therefore, she very much hoped to get a positive answer. As everyone knew, although bards were also arcane users, they were completely different from mages who relied on their intelligence to study and research. The main attribute that influenced their spell casting was charm, which was a person's persuasiveness, influence, leadership ability, and appearance. Simply put, it was the degree of acceptance by others. Obviously, Chloe was the representative of high charm, especially her naive character, which could easily arouse the affection of others. This could be seen from the experience on the pirate ship. That fat chef was obviously influenced by the girl's charm and unknowingly protected her for 2 whole weeks. According to the book, the magic of bards came from the heart, which was the so-called deepest part of the soul. Generally speaking, the more fantasy, passion, and romance one's heart was, the easier it was for them to express these feelings through magic spells and music. And Chloe fulfilled all these conditions. After careful consideration, Andre was surprised to find that his fiancée in name was really a good seed of a bard. With a little bit of training, she could become a real bard very soon. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. Yes, you do have the talent to be a bard. However, becoming a bard wasn't just about talent. It required a lot of training, such as picking locks, scouting, dismantling and setting up traps, as well as performing, deceiving, and gathering intelligence. In addition, there's also a large amount of combat skills. Are you sure you can endure this hardship? Goddess of Dawn above. This is the best news I've ever heard in my life. Don't worry, no matter how hard the training is, I will definitely persevere. For his dreams. Long live. Chloe excitedly stood up from the chair, waving her hands and shouting, venting the joy in her heart. When the old butler saw this scene, a gratified smile appeared on his face. He took 2 steps forward and reminded in a low voice, "Miss, I can understand your feelings at this moment, but please pay attention to your etiquette. After all, it is dinner time now." "All right, Borg, I'll go to my room to vent," Chloe said as she gave the old man a hug. Then, she picked up her book and skipped upstairs. After watching the girl disappear at the corner of the corridor, the old butler lowered his voice and asked, "Sir, are you sure that Miss Chloe has the talent to become a bard?" Andre swallowed the meat in his mouth and nodded with a serious expression. "Yes, absolutely. Some of her characteristics are very outstanding. It shouldn't be difficult for her to become a bard." Hearing this answer, the old butler was obviously relieved. He put one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. "Since you said so, I can rest assured. Please make sure that Miss Chloe has the ability to protect herself. If there's anything she needs, please let me know. No matter how difficult it is, I will try my best to do it. It's very troublesome to train a bard. I can take full responsibility for spells and music, but I have to hire professionals to teach the skills and combat skills of thieves. Of course, if you could get a similar training manual, it's not a problem." Andre directly put forward a few requirements. Since most of the real bard were spies trained by the top nobles and some organizations, it was quite dangerous to directly hire a bard as a teacher. In addition, these guys often seduced women everywhere, so their reputation could be said to be extremely bad. He didn't want to invite a wolf into his house. That's very simple. There's a female professional thief among the guards. Not only is she proficient in all kinds of skills, but she's also very good at using a rapier and a dagger. At the same time, she's also good at using a light crossbow. I'm sure she can meet your requirements. I'll go inform her now. When you set off tomorrow, she'll appear in your carriage." After finishing his words, the old butler Borg bowed and hurriedly walked to the guardhouse where the guards were resting. Looking at the tall and straight back of the old butler, Andre took a sip of wine and murmured to himself, "So this is the butler trained by a noble family for generations? What a terrifying degree of loyalty. He's completely abandoned himself." He could feel that this old man had a strong desire to protect Chloe. If there was an assassination, he would definitely use his own body as a shield to buy time for the girl to escape. Although he couldn't understand how a person could go to such an extent, he still respected this kind of person from the bottom of his heart. In the following time, Andre calmed himself down and enjoyed a sumptuous dinner. Afterwards, he returned to the study on the second floor and continued to analyze the structure of the level 4 Arcana spells Stone Skin and Igor's Black Tentacles. Compared to a rank 3 Arcana spell, the difficulty of a rank 4 Arcana spell was obviously more than double. The complex patterns and precise control placed a heavy burden on the brain. Soon, his forehead was covered with dense beads of sweat. After more than 4 hours, he barely managed to copy the Stone Skin spell into the spellbook. Looking at the abstruse magic patterns on the page, a bitter smile appeared on his face. He lowered his voice and cursed, "Damn it, I finally finished one. Looks like I'll have to rest for a while before I can move on to the next one. Otherwise, who knows if my brain will suddenly explode." No wonder people say that the path of magic is like a narrow wooden bridge. The slightest carelessness will cause you to fall off the bridge. Level 4 Arcana spells are already so difficult. I really don't know how terrifying level 9 spells are. The more he studied, the more difficult Arcana spells became. If level 0 Arcana spells were like middle school mathematics and geometry, then level 4 Arcana spells were like calculus. The gap was simply unimaginable. Chapter 186. It was no wonder that the higher the level of a mage, the fewer there were. Intelligence was one aspect, and knowledge was another. The reason why Andre could complete his studies so quickly was closely related to the science education he had in his previous life, especially the mathematical logic that he used to hate. Now, it was a great help to him. In fact, magic was the most sophisticated science on the Oleo continent. Not only did it contain a large amount of knowledge in mathematics, geometry, physics, and chemistry, but it also involved quantum mechanics, including time and space, as well as the soul, which humans on Earth had never touched upon. Any magic contained at least 3 kinds of knowledge, and every time Andre learned a new one, he would have a deeper understanding of the world. It was this fascinating knowledge that spurred him to move forward bravely, to pursue the power of arcane magic in an attempt to unravel the secrets hidden behind the world. The night passed quickly. At around 3 o'clock in the morning, Andre finally succeeded in copying Igor's Black Tentacles into his spellbook. He then went back to his room and hugged Chloe, who was wearing a silk nightgown, to sleep. However, he did not sleep for long. Just as the sun shone its first rays, a series of hurried knocks on the door woke the young man and woman on the bed up. Bang! 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 "Miss Chloe, Mr. Andre, the carriage, guards, and breakfast are all ready. If you want to return to 2A's Valley early, you better get up now. Otherwise, you will be stuck near the city gate for half a day." Bord's voice came from the crack of the door. "Ah, huh." Chloe opened her arms and yawned. She rubbed her sleepy eyes and replied in a lazy voice, "Got it. We'll get up now. Please hurry up. After all, it's not something a gentleman or a lady should do to make others wait." After saying that, footsteps could be heard outside the door. It seemed that the old butler had left. Chloe turned over and used her hair to poke Andre's nose. She said in a half-joking tone, "Dear, it's time for you to get up. I don't want to be lectured by Borg." Andre grabbed the girl's mischievous hand and lightly slapped her perky butt. He opened his eyes with a helpless expression. "You're such a naughty brat. All right, then get up first. You should know that I've only slept for 3 hours since midnight. My head is still a little dizzy. Hee hee. You can sleep after we get on the carriage. I can't wait to go back to the manor and receive training as a bard." Chloe smiled as she jumped down from the bed. She took off her white silk nightgown and was completely naked, revealing her white and tender skin. In particular, the twin peaks and pink bumps on her chest were exceptionally alluring, causing people to be unable to resist the urge to take a bite. The round buttocks below were more than enough to make any normal male's heart beat faster and their blood vessels swell. Looking at the girl's perfect body, Andre, who was in puberty, set up a little tent. He felt his mouth go dry, and it took him a lot of effort to shift his attention away. As the saying goes, a young man avoids lust, and a strong man avoids fighting. Although he was not a teenager mentally, his body and physiological characteristics were that of a young man. Therefore, he had to practice restraint in this aspect. Otherwise, it wouldn't take long for him to be addicted to it. Not only would it waste a lot of time, but would also easily leave hidden dangers in his body. The best age for a human to learn was between 12 and 25 years old. If he missed this age, he would have to work 10 times harder to make up for it in the future. Andre didn't want to overindulge in sex and delay his business, especially when Chloe was still so young. Her mental age was even worse than a 10-year-old child in the slums. He really couldn't bring himself to do it. Suppressing the burning desire in his heart, he finally put on his robe and boots. Just as he was about to push the door open, he suddenly heard the girl behind him asking for help. "Dear, can you help me tie the strap on my corset?" "Of course, it's my pleasure." Andre shrugged his shoulders and turned around to Chloe's back. Using his fastest speed, he tightened the ribbon and tied it into a bow. In such close contact, he could even smell the fragrance of the girl's body. He could reach out and touch her smooth back. The little tent, propped up by his lower body, was on her perky buttocks. As long as he took a step forward, he could immediately take all of this for himself. But at this crucial moment, Andre's rationality prevailed over his desire. He gently kissed the back of the girl's neck and pushed the door open to walk out of the room. Looking at the carriages that were ready to set off, he took a deep breath and calmed his restless emotions. He secretly sighed that men were indeed animals that thought with their lower bodies. He quickly washed up and began to eat breakfast. Half an hour later, 15 fully armed guards followed a luxurious carriage out of Lincoln City and drove along the main road in the direction of Tua's Valley. Not long after the city wall disappeared behind the horizon, Chloe suddenly pointed at a traveler outside the window and shouted, "Look, there's a half-orc over there." Andre, who was catching up on his sleep, quickly opened his eyes and asked, "Oh, where is it?" He was very interested in this special species that was a cross between humans and orcs. After all, half-orcs were rare in the civilized world. No matter where they went, they would be discriminated against to a certain extent. Moreover, the violent genes that flowed in their veins made these fellows dangerous. One simply did not know when they would remain silent and when they would suddenly explode. But one thing was certain, and that was that any half-orc that dared to enter the city was basically a skilled warrior. As long as they were given a commission and appropriate respect, they would immediately gain a powerful fighter. "It's that guy in black armor by the side of the road. Coachman, stop the carriage." Chloe's eyes lit up as she answered. Although Lincoln City was a city with an extremely developed maritime trade, and elves, dwarves, halflings, and many other intelligent races were often seen, half-orcs were very rare. That was why she was especially excited. Following the direction pointed out by the girl, Andre quickly saw a man in black armor and carrying a two-handed giant axe on his back. He was walking alone on the road towards the forest. The armor on his body was densely covered with cuts left by swords and knives. There were at least 3 terrifying scars on his face. The muscles all over his body were bulging, and his steps were strong and powerful. His skin was a silver gray and had a strange metallic luster to it. His 2 eyes were like bright lights in the darkness, bright and full of expression. Chapter 187. With just one look, Andre knew that this was at least a powerful warrior above level 12. His muscles and skin had been trained to be as hard as stone. A normal longsword would only be able to pierce through about 2 centimeters. Those who were not strong enough might even be repelled by the tough skin. A true killing machine in human form. He believed that once this half-orc went berserk, he would definitely be able to wipe out a small team of 100. He was definitely a true meat grinder on the battlefield. Although high-ranked warriors did not have the terrifying means of attack that mages had, they were definitely not weak. Their immense strength, vigorous vitality, and rich battle experience made them easy to deal with. What was even more frightening was that when they tempered their bodies, they would automatically absorb the magical energy that existed in every corner of their bodies, thus giving them different degrees of resistance to magic. Perhaps spells that could kill a normal person in one hit would be like scratching an itch for them. Coupled with their strong willpower, many control and charm spells would not be effective. Andre was very puzzled. Why would such a powerful warrior appear in the vicinity of Lincoln City? Just as he was racking his brains, the overly excited Crowley opened the car window and waved his hand. "Hey, Mr. Half-Orc, excuse me, where are you going? If it's on the way, why don't you come to the carriage? We can give you a ride." "Little girl, are you calling me?" The strong half-orc warrior stopped and pointed at himself. Chloe smiled and nodded. "Of course. This is the first time I've seen an half-orc in my life. If you don't mind, come in and sit. It would be even better if you could tell me a few stories on the way." "Ha ha. All right. I accept your invitation. You're the friendliest human I've met along the way." The half-orc warrior laughed heartily as he came to the front of the carriage, extending his hairy hand. "It's nice to meet you. I'm Cass, and I'm planning to go to the border forest to carry out a mission." "Aha. We're going to the Tours Valley, so it's on the way. By the way, my name is Chloe, and this is my fiancé. You can call him Andre." The young girl shook hands with the half-orc without any hesitation and warmly invited him into the carriage. Andre, who was sitting to the side, noticed that the guy's expression changed when he heard his name, especially his eyes, which flashed with a trace of surprise. Obviously, the other party had heard of his name. However, he didn't point it out. He maintained his smile and nodded politely. After the half-orc, who called himself Keys, entered the carriage immediately started running again. Chloe, who was filled with curiosity, could no longer suppress her restless heart. She asked eagerly, "Excuse me, Mr. Orc, are you an adventurer?" "Adventurer? You could say that. Strictly speaking, I should be considered a mercenary." Cass rubbed the beard on his chin and thought for a few minutes before answering. "May I be so bold as to ask the details of your mission this time?" Andre, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly asked. The half-orc warrior pretended to helplessly spread out his hands. "Sorry, the employer asked for confidentiality. This is related to the issue of credibility, so I can't answer." Andre pretended to smile apologetically and bowed. "I was reckless, but your professionalism is really admirable. You should know that there are very few mercenaries who keep their promises like you. Most of them are like vultures. Wherever there is war and death, there will be their shadows. They have no credibility at all and only know how to kill and plunder. It can't be helped. Mercenaries are a group of people who walk on the line of death all day long. Most of them pursue instant gratification. Since they want to enjoy themselves, they naturally need a lot of money, so they often become unscrupulous. But don't worry, I'm a mercenary who keeps my word. As long as I sign the contract, I will never violate it." Cass' words had to be said that the mentality and the current situation of the mercenaries in Orire was clear. Except for a few groups who were willing to follow the rules, most of them were a group of bastards who would not shrink from any crime. They had done a lot of things like burning villages and massacring cities. As long as they could afford to pay, even if they changed sides at the last minute, it didn't matter. In essence, they were no different from bandits. They just put on a legal appearance at certain times. Many mercenary groups were hired by the country and nobles when there was a war. They received a high commission while wreaking havoc on the enemy's land, fully showing the ugliest side of human nature. When he was in Lonely Mountain Town, Andre had heard Mayor Baylor mention that he had seen the atrocities of mercenaries when he was serving in the kingdom's army. Not only did they rob property and rape women, but they also degraded farmers into slaves and sold them to merchants. Once they encountered resistance, they would immediately raise their butcher's knife. In places where there were frequent wars, some villages and towns that mysteriously disappeared were the masterpieces of mercenaries. Of course, The so-called private armies of the nobles weren't any better, especially in the relatively isolated areas in the north. They were simply a group of thugs. As long as there was a chance to rob, these guys would definitely let it go. Because to them, robbing was a disguised way to increase their income. So there were often wars around the Cantera kingdom. Conflicts between the nobles were also very frequent. However, the northern county where Lonely Mountain Town was located was a notoriously poor place. Coupled with the fact that the people there were tough, it was good enough that they didn't rob others. If it weren't for the fact that it was the front line against the orcs, it would have been abandoned by the royal family long ago. Andre didn't believe the words of the half-orcs at all, not to mention this barbaric and ignorant world. Even in modern society on Earth, examples of armies burning, killing, and robbing were common. As for credibility, it was a joke. Everyone in Orion knew that the half-orcs were a kind of sinister, cunning, and capricious creatures. They were influenced by the blood of the orcs, and their hearts were filled with the desire to destroy and destroy. They worshipped force and killing. One second, they would be laughing and chatting with you, and the next second, they would pick up their weapons and attack you crazily. There were almost no exceptions for the half-orcs who could become leaders. They were all ruthless bastards. Expecting them to keep their promises was as laughable as expecting a cowardly goblin to become a mage. Obviously, Cass didn't see the sarcasm in Andre's eyes. He was still pretending to be forthright as he talked about his experiences. Chloe was listening to him. The girl's naive personality and life experience made it impossible for her to distinguish which stories were true and which were false. Especially when all the wilderness knowledge came from books and stories, it had long been exaggerated and detached from reality. Chapter 188. The Ogre Warriors were the strongest enemies I've ever met in my life. They were over 3 meters tall and weighed around 150 kilograms. Their skin was dark brown, and their bodies emitted a foul stench. The wooden clubs in their hands were as thick as a grown man's thigh, and when they smashed down, even rocks would be split into pieces. The orc excitedly recounted his battle with the ogres. Even though his vocabulary was limited, and it wasn't as thrilling as described in books and stories, it was much more realistic. Chloe blinked and asked nervously, "What happened after that? Tell me what happened after that." Huh. Even though the ogres have immense strength, they aren't without weaknesses. These fellows have bad tempers, and their movements are very clumsy. That's why I avoided the clubs and rushed forward, using my axe to chop off their feet. It was a fierce battle, and I killed at least 3 ogres. I even used their teeth to make a bone necklace. As he spoke, Cass pulled out a string of teeth from his armor. Collecting the teeth of ferocious beasts or powerful enemies was a custom of many primitive tribes. From this, it could be seen that he was definitely born in the wilderness and was deeply influenced by the local environment. Wow, you killed 3 ogres in one go. What an amazing feat. You're the second strongest person I've ever met. Chloe excitedly clapped her hands. Second, the orc warrior was momentarily stunned and hurriedly asked, "My goodness, could there be someone crazier in Linton City?" Seeing the unconcealable shock in his eyes, Chloe's face revealed a trace of pride. She turned her head and kissed Andre's cheek deeply. "This person is naturally my fiancé. I saw with my own eyes that he killed more than 60 pirates alone and even defeated a powerful demon in the end." Cass drew in a breath of cold air and asked with a slightly trembling voice, "Mr. Wizard, is this true? You really killed more than 60 pirates alone and even defeated a demon?" Andre nodded with a playful smile. "I use a little trick. When those fellows were killed, they didn't have any power to resist." Although the half-orc warrior's acting was very real, and even his eyes and other details were exactly the same, Roland still noticed the traces of acting from his nostrils, blood flow rate, and skin condition. He even felt that the reason why the other party's appearance was so coincidental was very likely to be specially arranged, and there was an ulterior motive behind it. From the very beginning, Andre had a strong sense of vigilance against the half-orc warriors. His hands, hidden under the loose robe, had been secretly preparing a spell. As long as there was a slight movement, he would immediately shoot out a bolt of lightning, causing great damage. Strategy? Are you referring to some powerful spells? Cass pretended to be curious and asked. Although the mastermind behind the scenes had already sent him the recent events in Linton City through the intelligence network, he was still very interested in the battle process. After all, as a collaborator, he knew very well how elite the subordinates sent by the pirate king of the Sardinia Islands were. Even if he were to fight them head-on, he would definitely die of exhaustion, let alone a young mage who was only half his level. The fox's tail was finally revealed. Andre discovered the other party's probing in an instant. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and a meaningful smile appeared on his face. Arcane spells are only a part of it. Most of it is used here. He tapped his forehead with a finger. I don't like to directly clash with the enemy. Sometimes a little poison, a sentence that is enough to stir the hearts of people, or even bribe and assassinate are often much more effective than magic itself. In my opinion, instead of solving problems with killing, it is better to instill fear in the enemy. When their psychological defenses collapse, even if you ask them to eat sh*t, they will not hesitate to do it. After hearing these words, Cass immediately couldn't help but shiver. His forehead was covered with dense beads of sweat, and the clothes under his armor were all soaked. He forced a smile. You are indeed a wise mage. I'm afraid a warrior like me will never be able to do this. Also, please allow me to express my condolences to your enemies. They have provoked an opponent that they can't defeat at all. Hee, you don't have to be so nervous. We are not enemies, are we? Andre stared at Cass with his two deep blue eyes. Of course, Mr. Mage. We are not enemies. Not in the past, not now, and not in the future. I don't want to be enemies with someone as scary as you. Cass stood up from the chair and bowed deeply. He knew that the young man in front of him had seen through him, so he did not hesitate to make a promise. Even without the warning from the mastermind behind the scenes, he did not want to provoke this young man at all. After all, it was too scary to be an enemy with such outstanding intelligence and unscrupulous means. Now that the situation had developed to this stage, even if Chloe was thick-skinned, she could tell that something was amiss. Just as she was about to ask, the coachman suddenly turned around and shouted, Your Excellency, we have arrived at 2A's Valley. Stop the carriage. Our guest should be getting off. I believe he must have a very important mission. Andre calmly gave the order. The coachman nodded and immediately pulled the reins. The two white horses immediately began to slow down and came to a stop after a while. Cass did not say anything and directly opened the door and jumped to the ground. He bowed slightly to the two people in the carriage. It's nice to meet you, young Mr. Mage. It's also nice to meet you, beautiful lady. I have to say, your fiancé is a very special person. After that, he turned around and walked away, quickly disappearing into the forest. Looking at the strong back of the half-orc warrior, Chloe lowered her voice and asked, Dear, who is he? Andre smiled and pulled the girl into his arms. He gently kissed her forehead and said, A potential enemy. But don't worry, he can't threaten us for now. Enemy? Chloe's eyes instantly widened as she covered her mouth with her little hand wearing a white lace glove. Oh, Goddess of Dawn, I actually invited a terrifying enemy into the carriage. It's all right, it's nothing. If he dared to make a move, he would be a corpse now. Andre caressed the girl's cheek and laughed as he comforted her. Even though the half-orc warrior's profession level was twice as high as his, but if a conflict broke out, he had absolute confidence in taking him down. Even though the half-orc warrior's profession level was twice as high as his, but if a conflict broke out, he had absolute confidence in taking him down. Chapter 189. Most of the time, the level of a profession did not represent one's battle prowess. This was especially true for arcane users, such as mages and warlocks. Often, if they used their spells appropriately, they would be able to defeat an enemy that was twice their level. Normally, as long as a level 7 mage was prepared in advance, he would have a chance of winning even against a level 15 close combat professional. Of course, if a warrior suddenly went berserk, there was a high chance that he could directly chop off a mage's head. In this world full of slaughter, there was not much difference between the hunter and the hunted. Battle prowess was a very abstract concept. After all, many powerful professionals did not die in a fierce battle. Often, a cup of poison wine, a poison arrow, or a precise sneak attack would be enough to take their lives. After sending off the orc warrior, Andre and Chloe returned to the carriage. After reporting their identities, the whole team slowly crossed the suspension bridge and entered the castle. After about 3 hours of travel, they finally arrived at their destination. According to the plan, the following month would be spent on farming and training the army, especially those undisciplined Brant cavalrymen. If they were not properly trained, they would not be able to meet his requirements at all. In his spare time, he would be teaching Beverly and Chloe, striving to let these two Lolas have a certain level of self-protection as soon as possible. Otherwise, if Linton City were to fall into chaos, it would be difficult for him to take care of everything. 1 week was not long, but it was not short either. Just as the team entered the castle, the little lowly Beverly quickly ran over and gave her mentor a warm hug. Her two big blue eyes were looking around. Andre felt that the girl's current appearance was very interesting. Thus, he gently stroked her soft golden hair and asked in a half-joking tone, "Little one, what are you looking for?" I'm looking for a gift. You promised that you would bring me a gift when you came back," Beverly said as she secretly turned her head to look at her mother. For a girl of this age, no amount of gold coins could compare to a satisfactory gift. Thus, her cute little face was filled with anticipation. "Ha ha, what a clever little girl. Here, this is your gift." Andre laughed as he took out the small crossbow he had prepared earlier. He knew that the little lowly had always wanted a long-range weapon for hunting, so he specially went to the blacksmith to order a small pulley crossbow. With the girl's current strength, she could pull it, and the effective range was 15 meters. It should be enough to hunt rabbits, pheasants, ducks, and other small animals. Wow, wow, wow. Mother, look, my mentor gave me a crossbow. It's really beautiful." Beverly excitedly hugged the small crossbow and started to yell. She excitedly scurried in the hall and let out ear-piercing screams from time to time. Seeing how happy her daughter was, Elsa had a gratified smile on her face. She stepped forward and gave her a hug. "Welcome back." Taking advantage of this opportunity, Andre licked the young widow's earlobe. At the same time, without anyone noticing, he pinched her plump and perky buttocks. He lowered his voice and said, "Remember to come to my room tonight." Elsa, who had been ambushed, instantly turned a little red. She resisted the desire that surged from the bottom of her heart, bit her lower lip, and nodded lightly. At this moment, she felt like a tide was flooding her lower body. She didn't dare to open her mouth or make any sound, because these actions could eventually evolve into moans of ecstasy. Chloe didn't notice this little movement. She took the young widow's hand and asked softly with a face full of concern, "Elsa, how have you been these days? Why is your face a little hot? Are you sick?" "No, I'm fine. I'm just a little excited to see you guys." Elsa hurriedly took a deep breath and replied. She didn't want anyone to know about her intimate relationship with Andre. To a certain extent, she was a woman who was very private and didn't want to share her secrets with anyone. "It's good that you're not sick. Come, let's go to the room upstairs. You have to know that many things have happened in Linton City these days." Chloe excitedly described the happenings of the past few days as she pulled the young widow's arm and quickly disappeared around the corner of the second floor. After watching the two beautiful women leave, Andre shook his head with a smile and sighed to himself. "Women are always so emotional. Sir, before discussing women, it's best if you look at the detailed plans of the territory. I've made them in the past few days, including the ratio of agriculture and livestock, the types of crops, the distribution of villages and towns, and so on. If there's anything that needs to be corrected, please point it out." Abner, who had been appointed as the chief steward, took 2 steps forward and handed over 20 parchment scrolls that were more than a meter long with both hands. After more than a week of adjustment, he'd finally gotten rid of his wolfish appearance. His short brown hair was neatly combed, and he wore a fitting black overcoat with dark blue trousers and a pair of brown pointed leather shoes on his feet. It was the standard look of a steward. Andre took the parchment and quickly flipped through the contents. His speed was so fast that everyone around him was dumbfounded. After all, the books and knowledge of Oriar were very precious. Even the most boring narrative novel rarely exceeded 200,000 words, which was why people's reading standards were very low. A story of 100,000 words would take 3 days to a week or so to read. However, thanks to the terrifying amount of reading he'd done in his previous life and his 19 points of intelligence, he easily had a photographic memory. In just a few minutes, he'd finished reading all of the contents. Abner subconsciously swallowed his saliva and asked carefully, My lord, you finished reading? Andre nodded without hesitation. Of course, you've done well. You've considered all aspects. Oh, right. Have you tried the plow I designed? How's the effect? Excellent. The effect is unbelievably good. With just 1 or 2 cows and 1 man, we can cultivate 30 times more land in a day than before. It's a complete miracle. At this rate, the entire valley will be completely developed in a few years. When that time comes, the grains, vegetables, meat, and eggs produced here will be enough to feed a third of Linton's population. You'll definitely make a fortune from this. Of course, we have to keep it a secret. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome if other families get their hands on it. Chapter 190. At the mention of the plow, Abner's eyes glowed with a chilling green light. He was so excited that his entire body was trembling. It was as if he could already see the golden fields of the autumn harvest. As an internal affairs consultant, he knew all too well how much change this simple tool could bring. If he handed it over to a kingdom that focused on agriculture, he would instantly receive a noble title and a large piece of rich land. Don't get too excited. Relax. This is just the beginning. The more effective agricultural reforms are yet to come. Farming is a rather profound field of study. It involves selecting seeds, growing seedlings, plowing, weeding, repelling insects, fertilizing, all the way to harvest. It's a complete and rigorous field of study. It's not just about planting seeds in the ground and waiting for them to bear fruit. When he was young in his previous life, Andre had lived with his grandfather in the countryside for a period of time. He knew very well what it took to obtain a harvest. He clearly remembered that after his grandfather passed away, his parents had gone to the outskirts of the countryside to plant tomatoes for 2 years. In the first year, they had watered and fertilized the crops, and they had indeed obtained a bountiful harvest. But in the second year, due to their busy work, they did not care much after planting the tomatoes. In the end, only a few tomatoes had been produced, and each one was smaller than the last. Only by risking one's life could one be rewarded handsomely. This was the unchanging principle between the land and humans. Abner calmed his agitated emotions and bowed deeply with a solemn expression. Please be at ease. I have already done as you requested. I have begun digging the irrigation channels. At the same time, the toilets and fertilizer ponds are also being built. As long as they are half, or even a third, of what you described, I can guarantee that we will obtain an unimaginable harvest in 6 months. Andre waved his hand with a smile. No, trust me. If these 2 items can be done as I requested, the result will definitely exceed your imagination. By the way, how are the slaves doing now? Did anyone cause trouble? No, those slaves are obviously earthworms caught from the southern islands. They're all so obedient that they don't even look like humans. They're naturally gentle. Besides, they've always had enough black bread according to your instructions. How could anything happen to them? Abner curled his lips in disdain. It was obvious that he despised these obedient slaves. Be it his eyes or his actions, he did not think much of them. Earthworm? Andre's face was filled with confusion. Abner stroked his beard and laughed heartily as he explained, Ha ha! In fact, it was a nickname, or rather a derogatory one, for those who lived at the bottom of the Southern Isles, because they only knew how to bury themselves in farming and work. The island, there was still a primitive slave country. Other than a few nobles and warriors, the rest were all slaves. There were no so-called civilians at all. Due to the confinement of their thoughts, The slaves are used to obeying the orders of their masters. Even if they are asked to be buried with their masters, they will not resist. How terrifying! Don't tell me that there aren't a few smart ones among the slaves who rose up and resisted. Hearing this, Andre began to feel glad that he was not too unlucky when he transmigrated. Although the freedom of the mountain people was restricted, they still had basic human rights. It was much better than being a slave. Resist? Abner sneered. My lord, if they knew how to resist, the Matek people wouldn't be called earthworms. They even need to wait for their master's permission to mate. How smart do you think these guys are? You mean they completely obey their master's orders? Andre's eyes instantly lit up. He was thinking to himself if he could extract some of the stronger ones and train them to become foot soldiers. After all, in the era of cold weapons, any soldier who could carry out orders without hesitation had the right to be called an elite. This was especially true for large-scale spear formations. They were the cheapest and most practical soldiers of this era. Abner saw through Andre's plan at a glance and hurriedly stopped him. My lord, don't expect these Matek people to be qualified soldiers. Although their strength and endurance are decent, they are pathetically cowardly. Don't even talk about fighting two armies. Even a flick of a whip is enough to make them kneel on the ground and tremble in fear. All right, it seems like I've been overthinking things. Since these fellows are so cowardly, I'll just let them work. At least I won't have to worry about a slave revolt. Andre smiled bitterly. The Matek people are born slaves. They can only live a normal life under the command and protection of their master. Someone once tried to grant these people freedom, but they starved to death on the streets in less than half a month. Perhaps Abner had noticed something, but he explained the characteristics of the Matek people. It was as if he was afraid that his master would impulsively grant freedom to all the slaves. However, he wasn't wrong. Andre had intended to find an opportunity to slowly turn all the slaves into commoners. After all, didn't the books on Earth mention that once slaves obtained their own land, they would immediately explode with unparalleled enthusiasm for work? But now it seemed that doing so would undoubtedly push those slaves who had no opinions of their own into the abyss of death. Before transmigrating, Andre had read in a book called General History of the World that in ancient Egypt in 1700 BC, there was the first slave revolt of mankind. They chased away all the rulers in an attempt to establish a country that truly belonged to them. Unfortunately, these slaves didn't have enough knowledge to govern a country. They didn't know how to organize production, nor did they know how to set up an administrative structure. In the end, after all the food was consumed, a terrible famine broke out. They couldn't find a solution at all. In the end, they could only invite back the pharaohs, nobles, and priests who had been expelled to continue enslaving them. It had to be said that this was a great irony because all revolts in human history were often accompanied by slaughter and destruction. Those who could overthrow decadent rulers and establish a country were few and far between. Most of them were just a group of thugs who brought disaster wherever they went. It could definitely be said that wherever they went, not even a blade of grass would grow. Andre didn't know how long the Matek people, who were known as earthworms, could endure. Therefore, he decided to try to improve their quality of life and see if there would be any changes. He would treat it as a social experiment. Chapter 191. Your Excellency, the land around the lake is too damp. I'm afraid it's impossible to grow wheat. Do you think it's possible to grow other crops, such as rice? Abner asked carefully. He knew that this new crop from the southern islands was not very popular among the nobles. After all, habit was a very scary thing. Once it was formed, it was very difficult to change. Even the poor commoners were unwilling to eat this strange large grain. Rice? You're saying that there's rice here? Andre's eyes lit up, and he immediately asked impatiently. As a transmigrator from Earth, he knew the value of rice to agriculture all too well, especially in a warm climate like Lincoln City. As long as it was close to a river or lake, it would not be a problem for it to ripen 3 times a year. Abner shrugged and replied, Yes, I checked a few days ago. There are many rice seeds stored in the warehouse road. The city hall should have tried to promote it here, but it obviously failed. Failed? Why? Andre could not understand why such a high-yield crop was not accepted by the farmers. After all, there were many poor people in the city who did not have enough to eat. Could it be that eating habits were more important than starving? The reason is actually very simple. There are mainly two aspects. The first is that the people do not know how to eat it. The second is that the yield is too low and it is very troublesome to take care of it. It requires constant watering, so it is far better to grow wheat, Abner explained in detail. The yield is too low. Hearing this, Andre almost choked on his own saliva. He quickly patted his chest and resisted the urge to bang his head against the wall. He lowered his voice and asked, "Can you tell me how the farmers here grow rice? As far as I know, this is a very high-yield crop. How can the yield be lower than wheat?" Abner was slightly taken aback. He immediately took out a piece of parchment from his bosom. "This is the planting record I found in the warehouse. Everything is recorded clearly. You should understand after reading it." Half a meter apart, Andre cried out involuntarily after a single glance. His face was filled with shock, and his heart was filled with 10,000 alpacas. One had to know that the most fundamental difference between rice and wheat was pollination. Wheat was automatically pollinated, while rice was pollinated by poplar flowers. The former didn't need to do anything and could naturally produce grains. The latter required wind or artificial mixing of the two types of pollen. If there wasn't enough wind, the natural pollination rate would be less than 15% to 20%. What was even more infuriating was that the distance recorded on the parchment was actually more than half a meter. Even if there was a strong wind, the success rate of pollination would not be high. In fact, the solution to this problem was very simple. As long as the distance was reduced to a normal range, then use a stick, rope, or something like that to push the rice when it bloomed. However, in Orier, this technology had not yet been invented. Without any hesitation, he picked up the quill on the table, dipped it in the ink on the table, and quickly wrote down the correct method of planting rice. Then, he immediately handed it to Abner. "Take it. Follow this method. I guarantee that the yield of rice will be much higher than wheat. Remember, wherever you can plant rice, plant it there. Plant wheat in the remaining dry land. Also, it's best to raise some fish and frogs in the paddy fields. Not only can they control pests, they can also increase the amount of meat for the farmers." Goddess of the earth, Freya, above, where did you get all this knowledge from? You couldn't have been enlightened by the goddess, right? Abner's voice was trembling, his eyes filled with disbelief. Andre did not answer the question directly. He only smiled and winked. "Haha, this is a secret. I can't tell you the answer yet." He knew that the things he took out were slightly shocking, but there was no other way. At most, in 7 to 8 months, the entire Lincoln City would fall into an unprecedented famine. Thus, he had to prepare enough food. Otherwise, even if the mastermind behind the scenes was defeated, the starving people would not be able to calm down. If things went wrong, this ancient and prosperous city would be reduced to ruins under the chaos and raging flames. Abner shuddered and hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Understood. Don't worry. I will do everything according to your orders. No one will be able to obtain this precious agricultural knowledge." "Very good. I believe in your talents, and at the same time, give you sufficient authority. Remember, no matter what, I want you to see enough food in half a year. Understood?" A cold light flashed in Andre's eyes when he said the last word. His entire body emitted an immense pressure. "I swear, I won't disappoint you." Abner knelt on one knee and solemnly promised. "Do well. If you don't disappoint me, I won't disappoint you either. If you can do this in half a year, not only will you regain your freedom, you'll also receive a generous reward." With that, Andre patted Abner's shoulder and turned to walk into the valley. After solving the problem of agriculture, he now wanted to see the soldiers he'd spent a lot of money to buy and give them the correct training methods. After all, the soldiers of Brant weren't very disciplined, especially when they were hot-blooded. They couldn't control themselves at all and only knew how to shoot arrows and charge like crazy. It wouldn't be easy to become cavalry that obeyed orders. Of course, this lack of discipline wasn't unique to the soldiers of Brant. All of Aurère's armies weren't that disciplined. Many of the nobles' private forces would swarm forward without orders, and only a small number of knights could maintain their formation while charging. Riding his horse through a large field, Andrei saw a large number of busy farmers and slaves. Some of them were reclaiming wasteland, some were building wooden houses, and some were learning how to use the plow. In many places, they had dug a half-meter-wide canal. It was a busy scene. Some of the farmlands had sprouted tender shoots. It should be the winter wheat planted by the farmers. According to his speculations, Lincoln City should be in a subtropical region. Even in winter, the temperature was between 5 to 15 degrees. There was also plenty of sunlight, so the wheat was already quite tall at this time. It would probably ripen in May or June and could be harvested about twice a year. It was because of this that the farmers here could still fill their stomachs, unlike Lonely Hill Town. If they didn't hunt, the uneven rye in the terraced fields would starve at least half of the people here. Chapter 192. The harsh environment and hunting instincts had forged the fearless character of the Highlanders in the north. They dared to fight any beast or enemy. Even when faced with an army of tens of thousands of orcs, they could still straighten their backs and fight with all their might to protect their homeland. As for the farmers in the south, they had long degenerated into laborers with the agricultural civilization. Even a small group of gnomes could cause them to panic. At best, they could only chase away a small number of gnomes and kobolds. The so-called militia had performed poorly when the barbarians attacked not long ago. To be more precise, they were defeated at the first touch. They had no fighting ability at all. Andrei did not dare to count on these fork-wielding farmers to step forward at the critical moment. That was why the training of his private army could not be delayed. He needed an elite cavalry that was proficient in scouting, harassing, charging, intercepting, and hunting. Even though he could only maintain about 350 men with his current financial resources, they could definitely be used as a force of 2,000 infantrymen as long as they were used properly. Galloping along the Dug Canal, they soon saw a large lake in the center of the valley basin. On the other side of the lake was a temporary military camp. Large herds of cows, sheep, and horses were leisurely grazing on grass. Hundreds of cavalrymen were holding wooden spears in their hands as they practiced charging in the enclosed area. The haystacks were riddled with holes by them. There was no formation. There was no hierarchy. There was no discipline. They were just like a disorderly mob without any command. These soldiers from the Kingdom of Brant had no strategy at all. They relied solely on their excellent horsemanship to fight for themselves. It looked like they were in a group hunt. All right, at least their individual fighting ability is still considered outstanding, isn't it? Andrei sighed as he helplessly comforted himself. It was clear that the performance of these cavalrymen did not satisfy him. It should be known that an army was not a street brawl. In the battle of tens of thousands of people, no matter how brave an individual was, they were too insignificant. Unless it was a tireless killing machine, a legendary warrior, it was impossible to change the final outcome. An army should be full of order, where orders and prohibitions were obeyed. In war, formations and tactics were used to create opportunities to deal a fatal blow to the enemy, thus laying the foundation for victory. Sometimes there was even no need to fight head-on. As long as the enemy's reinforcements were cut off, victory could be obtained easily. But it was a pity that Aurère's war hadn't developed to the point where they would resort to all sorts of underhanded means. At most, they would bribe and rope people in private. In real battles, they would generally fight in an open battle. Even monsters like the orcs and goblins who lived in the wild would consciously follow the rules. But now, Andrei was ready to open Pandora's box with his own hands. He would use all the ideas of this world to build his own private army and unleash the terrifying monster that was tactics. There was nothing in the world that remained the same. Whether it was life, objects, civilizations, weapons, or habits, everything was constantly developing and changing. Whether you were willing or not, you had to adapt. Otherwise, you would soon be eliminated by the cruel environment. Andrei knew very well that perhaps the changes he brought about would make Aurère's war more cruel, but at the same time, it would also accelerate the progress of civilization. After all, war was a catalyst for scientific and social progress. Perhaps after a few hundred years of war, this land, full of barbarism and ignorance, would gradually become civilized. As a transmigrator, he felt that it was necessary for him to bring some influence to the entire world. At least, he would leave his own footprints, he thought as he led the black warhorse. After a while, he stepped into the training ground. Before he got too close, he saw someone riding a horse toward him. "Master, why are you here?" A burly man who was practicing equestrian archery jumped off his horse and asked loudly. "Of course, I'm here to teach you how to train properly. How is it, Buzz? Did anything happen to the new guys?" Andre said as he handed the horse's reins to Buzz and glanced at the situation on the training ground. Although some of the soldiers looked a little pale, they were in good health. They were neither injured nor sick. Buzz shrugged with a smile. "Hee. We now have food and water, a place to stay, and a flock of livestock. Of course, it can't be any better. As for training, I don't think it's necessary, right? Everyone on the continent knows that we, the Brant Wind Riders, are the best riders. We grew up on horseback since we were young. Whether it's bows, scimitars, or lances, we are all very good." Andre shook his head gently. "No, you don't understand what I mean. Yes, you are all excellent riders and soldiers, but that doesn't mean that you are also an excellent army. Look carefully at the training ground. Don't you feel that something is missing?" Buzz, who was more than 2 meters tall, was puzzled. He stared at the training ground with his big black eyes for a long time. In the end, he scratched his head and showed a very innocent expression. "I'm sorry, Master. I don't see what's missing." In the Brant Plains, the 1,000-rider commander taught all the soldiers to use bows and arrows at long range and switch to lances and scimitars at close range. Discipline, tactics, that's what you're missing. Don't tell me that you all charged together in a mess during a battle. Andre finally couldn't help but roar. He then rubbed his forehead in pain. He suddenly felt like he was playing the lute to a cow. Perhaps this strong man in front of him, who was not even 30 years old, had transferred all the nutrients that his brain needed to his muscles. Therefore, when it came to a more profound question, this guy was like an idiot. In fact, the people living at the bottom of Orire were similar. It was very likely that they had never seen a word in their entire life. They could only speak and listen to the common language. They couldn't read or write at all. Many farmers couldn't even calculate slightly more complicated accounts. Some were so stupid that they couldn't even count from 1 to 100. Therefore, it was very difficult and painful to communicate with them. When he was in Lonely Mountain Town, Andre had encountered a similar problem. He originally thought that the more developed Lincoln City in the south would be better, but who would have thought that the overall quality of the residents in the city would be better? However, after coming to Turith Valley and interacting with the farmers, he instantly realized that there was a saying in his previous life that was true. Poverty seriously affected intelligence. Chapter 193. Just think about it. If a child grew up in a poor family, did not get enough nutrition, did not receive any education, and worked hard to make a living every day, even if he was Einstein, Tesla, or Newton, he would gradually become mediocre or even stupid. There was a saying that the environment determined one's character, and character determined one's fate. As for education, that was the only way to change one's fate. Perhaps a child living in a city could become smarter under the influence of the environment, but a child living in a village would never have such an opportunity. All they could do was work day and night so that they could fill their stomachs and pay the high taxes at the same time. Obviously, the grassland kingdom of Brant was an extremely backward place. There were only 3 to 5 cities in the entire kingdom, and most of the people still maintained a primitive nomadic lifestyle. That was why most of the soldiers who came from there were simple-minded and well-built. Buzz was a representative of this. Although he was temporarily appointed as the commander of this cavalry unit due to his outstanding performance in the battle against the barbarians, Andre would not hesitate to discard him if he could not adapt to the new tactics in the future training. Discipline and tactics? Buzz repeated these 2 words blankly. It seemed like he had never heard of them before. Andre sighed helplessly and explained, I'm not rushing you. Discipline determines the combat power of an army, and tactics determine how to achieve the greatest results with the least cost. Let me give you a simple example. What do you usually do when you encounter the orcs on the grassland? Buzz stroked the beard on his chin and pondered for a moment. He immediately replied, First, we shoot with bows and arrows. When the orcs get close, we switch to melee weapons and charge. Oh, my goodness. Shouldn't the first thing be to confirm the number of the enemy? Andre groaned in pain as he could not stand the simple and crude tactics of this big man in front of him. He finally understood why not many people were willing to buy these Brant soldiers who were skilled in martial arts and cheap. If they fought without caring about casualties, they would probably all die or be captured by the enemy after a few tough battles. Master, I'm afraid you don't know this. The orc wolf riders are much faster than horses. Therefore, no matter how many of them there are, we only have one way to survive, and that is to charge forward and fight with our lives. On the prairie, unless you could fly, no one could escape the pursuit of a warg. Please believe me, when dealing with the orcs, any prearranged formation will be broken in a very short period of time. What will follow will be a chaotic battle. Whoever can last until the end will be the winner. Buzz's saliva flew everywhere as he spoke. He kept waving his fists as if he was fighting an orc. Andre took a few steps back to avoid the splashing saliva and shook his head helplessly. No, you're wrong. There is actually a better way, but it hasn't been discovered yet. Think about it. If you use the warhorse's speed to outflank the enemy while aiming at them with poisoned arrows, wouldn't you be able to greatly reduce your own injuries? Or take a position downwind and prepare a few grass balls that can emit poisonous gas in advance. Ignite them and push them towards the enemy. Speaking until here, he stretched out his finger and pointed at his temple. All in all, there are many ways to defeat the enemy. It's just that most people are limited by their own thinking. What you need to do is to break your original understanding and accept the training and tactics that I provide. Are you going to teach us these methods that can easily defeat the enemy? Buzz's face turned red as he asked in a hurried voice. As an officer who had once been a commander of 100 cavalry, he knew better than any of his compatriots what these things meant. He also knew how powerful they would be once they were trained. Thus, he became abnormally excited. His strong arms were even trembling slightly. Of course, I'm going to bring about a revolution in the military. I'm going to train you into the most elite cavalry in the entire Orire. I'm going to make all the enemies tremble when they hear your name. Now, tell me, are you willing to accept this challenge? Andre's eyes released 2 beams of light as he stared at the 2-meter-tall man. I swear, in the name of the god of war, Quintus, I'm willing to accept all your training and never betray you. Without any hesitation, Buzz knelt on one knee and cut his face with a dagger. He swore the heaviest oath of the Brant people. I swear too. Me too. Me too. In an instant, all the slave soldiers stopped their training and gathered. They followed Buzz's steps and cut their faces. Blood flowed down their determined faces and rolled onto the grass. Looking at the desire in the eyes of these men, Andre nodded in satisfaction. He opened his arms and shouted, Very good. I accept your oath, but let's put the ugly words first. The training will be very strict. Anyone who can achieve the expected goal will be eliminated without hesitation. Those who fail can only be a lowly herdsman for the rest of their lives. Remember, I want an elite army that can shock the world. Buzz pounded his chest and roared with a ferocious expression. Please don't worry. I can guarantee that there are no cowards here. Yes, we're not cowards. That's right. If those cowardly nobles didn't run away first, we wouldn't have become captives. Those damn selfish bastards have abandoned us. Anger began to spread among the soldiers. Some of them had bloodshot eyes and were pounding the ground with their fists to vent the humiliation in their hearts. I believe what you said, and I also believe that you can become a true elite cavalry. Now, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Cursing the enemy with words is something only weaklings do. All of you stand up. After saying that, Andre waved his whip and cracked in the air until everyone stood up. After sweeping his gaze across everyone's eyes, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly and revealed a strange smile. Not bad. It seems like you've started to learn how to obey orders. From now on, each of you will have to temporarily abandon your name and dignity and become a soldier who only knows how to obey orders. In the next few months, I will teach you what discipline is, what tactics are, and what tactics to use when facing the enemy. If anyone wants to quit, say so immediately, because once you join, there is no third way to leave other than elimination and death. I can tell you very seriously that this will be a journey to hell. Chapter 194. Training an army was never an easy task, especially in the era of cold weapons. Even Andre, a transmigrator, couldn't tell which type of private army was most suitable for him. However, he knew that no matter if it was an ancient army or a modern one, they couldn't do without strict discipline. Since ancient times, strict adherence to orders was the highest pursuit that all commanders and generals had for their armies. The more disciplined an army was, the stronger its combat power would be. Even if it was a group of new recruits who had never seen blood, as long as they were able to carry out orders meticulously, then after 1 or 2 battles, they would immediately become true elites. There was a saying that went, "When 2 enemies meet on a narrow path, the brave will win." When 2 armies fought on the battlefield, the one who could suppress the fear of death to the greatest extent would win the final victory. And discipline was the most crucial point. The quality of the Brant cavalry wasn't bad. Their average height was more than 7 meters, and there were quite a few who were more than 2 meters. Each of them had a strong physique, were skilled in archery and horse riding, and were good at using all kinds of weapons. Although they couldn't compare to a true rank 1 warrior, they were definitely better than the ordinary soldiers of Lincoln City. To a certain extent, their combat skills didn't need any more training. What they needed now was to strengthen their discipline and instill new tactical ideas. They could fully utilize the mobility of the cavalry and give the enemy a big surprise when the time came. The training was cruel. To be exact, it was inhumane. Andre abandoned the meaningless military posture, walking and turning in the modern army. He directly used endless running, cross-country, sit-ups, weightlifting, and so on to train everyone's muscles and endurance. After all, he wanted to train the cavalry, so there was no need to demand a neat formation. Instead, it was more important to train the strength of the upper limbs and waist. This was because whether it was shooting arrows, waving scimitars, or charging with a lance, they couldn't do without these 2 points. As for the formation and tactics of the cavalry, that was the next stage. The main thing now was to let the soldiers learn to obey orders and respond immediately after hearing them. To put it bluntly, it was like training a dog. Everyone would form a conditioned reflex. When the order was given, their bodies would react first before they could think. At the first glimmer of dawn, more than 350 Brant warriors were rudely woken up by Andre and began a day of training. First, it was a 2-hour morning run around the lakeside, followed by breakfast. After breakfast, it was immediately followed by a whole morning of strength training. He would only stop when he was dead tired. After lunch, until the sky turned dark, everyone was running and stopping. Along the way, there were people who kept vomiting, losing strength, fainting, and even temporarily going into shock. Fortunately, more than 30 people were organized in advance for emergency treatment at any time. Otherwise, someone would definitely die. After an entire afternoon of training, most of the people returned to the training ground one after another. They ate the food that had already been prepared, which included all kinds of meat, animal organs, fresh bread, vegetables, and large amounts of eggs. Almost all the nutrients that the human body needed were included. However, it was clear that the overtrained soldiers did not have a good appetite. But under the gaze of Andre's deep blue eyes, they all shook their cheeks and forced themselves to eat. Otherwise, they all knew what would happen to them. After eating and playing, the soldiers who were sore all over couldn't immediately rest. They first had to communicate with their war horses for about 2 hours, wash them, brush them, feed them, and then ride them for a few laps. After that, it was time for bedtime education. The chief of the fief, Abner, would teach everyone to read and write in the common language. At the same time, he would tell 1 or 2 short stories related to the war. It could be said that this was the favorite part of the soldiers. It was also a good time to relax. At around 9 o'clock in the evening, they took a bath in batches and then fell into a deep sleep. Time flew by. The 350 soldiers of Brant clenched their teeth. No matter how hard it was, none of them chose to quit. They didn't even complain. They silently endured the cruel training day after day. Even if Andre used extremely insulting words to curse them or whip them, they didn't make a sound. Because of the training that lasted for more than half a month, they could feel that their bodies were transforming in the direction of professional warriors. Regardless of whether it was strength, speed, endurance, or agility, they were all significantly improved. This kind of training that was close to the limit squeezed out the potential of everyone. It was believed that if they continued for another half a month, at least a third of them would be able to cross the threshold and become a true first-rank warrior. Perhaps at the beginning, most of them were just trying their luck. But now, no one doubted Andre's words. One day, they would really become an army that would make all enemies tremble at the mention of their name. At this moment, Buzz was running around the lake with all his might. He had already become a professional warrior 3 days ago. So, his breathing was stable and there were no signs of fatigue. The originally exaggerated muscles on his upper body seemed to have been compressed by some kind of force. They looked much smaller, but their strength and explosive power were a level higher. In fact, all the professions in Orire were related to the magical energy that was everywhere. Spellcasters used their knowledge and skills to resonate through certain rituals. They manifested it in the form of arcane spells, divine spells, or innate abilities. Close combat professions used magical energy to transform their bodies. Bandits made their bodies more agile and light. They could do many unimaginable moves. As for warriors, they improved their physical attributes. Their internal organs, blood vessels, bones, muscles, skin, and even hair. It was said that after the strongest warriors tightened their muscles, only a white mark would be left on them. However, legends were legends, after all. No one knew if they were true. It had been a long time since a legendary warrior had appeared in the entire continent. But for Buzz, the past half a month was like a rebirth. Although he would be as tired as a dead dog at the end of every day, this kind of life was very fulfilling and filled his heart with hope. If possible, he hoped to continue until the day he died. How is it? My training method is pretty good, right? Andre asked with a smile on his face as he rode on his horse. In the beginning, he was worried that the soldiers wouldn't be able to take it. But after a week, not only did no one get eliminated, but they also seemed to have eaten a strengthening spirit as their physical conditions improved by leaps and bounds. Chapter 195. Abner took a deep breath, replying with a slightly trembling voice. It's not just good. It's unbelievable. Do you know what a great thing you've done? You've trained a group of soldiers into professionals in just over half a month. Oh my gods. I'm starting to believe that you're an emissary of some god, or perhaps the heir of an ancient family. Seeing the other's excited and nervous expression, Andre couldn't help but laugh and wave his hands. Ha 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 ha. You're mistaken, my dear butler. To tell you the truth, this training method is only suitable for those with strong wills and excellent physiques. Ordinary people don't need much. Even a fifth of the current training might cause sudden death. Although it was very comfortable to hear someone praise him, he knew very well that the reason for the success of the extreme training was due to the special dietary habits of the Brant soldiers. They grew up eating dairy products and meat, so their physiques were several times stronger than most ordinary people. This could be seen from their average height. Most of the men in Linton City were between 1.6 and 1.7 meters tall, with very few reaching 1.8 meters. The women were even shorter, usually between 1.5 and 1.6 meters. The average height of the Brant soldiers was above 1.8 meters, and their weight was between 70 and 90 kilograms. Compared to the former, They were practically burly men. If not for their robust physiques, Andre wouldn't have dared to go through with the extreme training. He was already considering buying a batch of brand slaves when he had the money. As long as he could gather 1,000 people, he would definitely be able to easily defeat enemies several times their number. Even so, you've done a very impressive thing. If half of these 350 soldiers can become professional warriors, then the entire Valley Manor will be impregnable. Even if it's besieged by tens of thousands of monsters, it'll be enough to last until Linton City sends reinforcements. Abner's eyes revealed a trace of excitement. Advanced agricultural knowledge, a powerful army, a wise wizard himself. He could almost see Andre's glorious future. As a scholar and advisor attached to nobles, Abner knew very well what kind of wondrous changes would occur when the three were combined. As long as there weren't any major accidents, his master would sooner or later become a great figure that would shake the entire Orire. He would also be able to rely on his achievements to rise up the ranks and become a powerful manager. A dream buried in the bottom of everyone's hearts. From the high and mighty kings to the beggars on the streets, there was no exception. Some said that it was the embodiment of desire and greed, while others said that it was the driving force behind the development of society and civilization. However, it was a pity that most people were unable to realize their dreams in their entire lives. Therefore, in the eyes of some people, it was worthless, but in the eyes of others, it was more important than their own lives. At this moment, Abner felt that the dream that had been hidden in the depths of his heart for many years had finally taken root and sprouted. As long as he walked down this path unswervingly, the chances of it coming true in the future were very high. He clenched his fists and swore to himself that he would follow closely behind Andre and do his best to become his master's right-hand man. As the saying went, once a person had hope, they would be able to overcome even the most terrible of hardships and accomplish even the most difficult of tasks. Abner, who was filled with longing for the future, quickly left the training grounds and ran without stopping to rest for the village that was being built. He was now filled with enthusiasm, intending to open up the paddy field as soon as possible and start planting rice according to the method on the parchment. In the following days, Andre was busy every day at the training grounds, the fields, and the castle. He continued to train the soldiers while also teaching Beverly and Chloe magical knowledge. At the same time, he had them attempt to learn how to concoct potions. At the same time, he didn't forget to check on the progress of the crops on the way back and forth. Only when night fell would he calm down and do some research of his own. Apart from all these, he also took the time to organize people to catch the giant pike in the middle of the lake. The meat of this big fellow was very delicious, and many people were full of praise after tasting it. Although such a life was very fulfilling and relaxing, a messenger from Linton City broke the silence on the last day of February. "Sir, I'm a messenger from the City Council. I have specially come to inform you that you must be present at the council hall on the last day of March. There will be a referendum to decide whether to start a trade war with Bakarov City. If you do not show up at that time, the council will treat it as abstention." The well-dressed young man finished reading the contents of the parchment and politely handed it over with both hands. He had obviously received a good education. If Brindle guessed correctly, he should be from a noble family. Perhaps he was an illegitimate child, or perhaps the youngest son without the right to inherit. Don't think that as long as you are a descendant of a noble family, you can live a life of luxury. It's fine if you don't have the right to inherit. At the very least, you can get some support from your family when you become independent. However, illegitimate children who are seen as a huge mistake by the entire class are usually no better than commoners. If you meet a responsible parent, you might be able to get a job like a messenger, a coachman, a butler, or a servant. However, if you meet an irresponsible or ruthless parent, you might not even be able to live to adulthood. Andre sat on the sofa and took the parchment. He glanced at it and found that it was stamped with the seals of 4 dukes. The situation had obviously reached a critical point. After all, the trade war of the Green Sea Alliance was no child's play. It meant that 2 cities would muster all their strength and fight each other at sea. They would plunder each other's ships, sink each other's warships, and even attack the ports if possible. It was equivalent to an all-out war in this world. If it was approved, Linton City would have to implement a policy of war. All soldiers would be on alert, and even mages would not be allowed to leave easily. They would have to wait until they were ready to fight. Andre sighed inwardly. The mastermind had finally made his move. He nodded with a friendly smile. Thank you for the notice. I will definitely be there on time. Then I will take my leave first. There are more than 100 nobles in the city council. About half of them live outside the city. I have to inform them one by one. The messenger bowed gracefully and quickly left the castle under the guidance of a servant. He rode his horse towards the west. Chapter 196. Andre stood in front of the window and looked at his back that was gradually disappearing. He took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "All right, since the magnificent stage has been set up, let me see who exactly you are and what methods you're going to use to topple this city." Just as he finished speaking, a raven suddenly landed on the windowsill and used its slender beak to knock on the glass window, yelling at the top of its voice, "Open the window quickly. I brought you a package." A package? Andre was stunned for a moment, then quickly pulled open the latch and gently pushed open the window. He could tell at a glance that this little fellow with black feathers must be some mage's magical pet. Perhaps something had happened at the Mage Association, so he didn't dare to be negligent. The raven flapped its wings and flew to the table, opened the little bag wrapped around its leg, shook its feathers, and cursed in a low voice. "Damn it, this thing is so heavy. You have to give me some compensation. Of course, you can enjoy the snacks, jerky, and drinks on the table as you wish." Andre smiled and made a gesture of invitation, then grabbed the palm-sized cloth bag, eager to see what was inside. "That's more like it." The raven muttered softly and skipped to the side of the plate, tore off a small piece of beef jerky, and ate it happily. Even though, after becoming a magical pet, this bird's intelligence was not inferior to that of a normal person, but its temperament was still like that of a child's. As long as there was food, it would become very happy. Andre smiled at the sight of Raven's gluttonous appearance. He opened the pouch and took out a ring and a letter embedded with an ink crystal. The soul of the exotic beast within the ink crystal was constantly roaming about. There was a layer of hazy mist on the surface of the ink crystal. It was clearly a manifestation of abundant soul energy. He instantly realized that this was sent by President Boris and hurriedly opened the letter, carefully reading the contents inside. "Andre, I believe that when you read this letter, you should have already received the ring. It can give you some of the translocator's abilities, including short-distance teleportation 5 times a day, and creating an illusion identical to the original body 3 times a day. At the same time, I've also done some work on the metal, and it can add lightning damage to your hand or the weapon in your hand. Although the damage isn't great, it has a very good paralyzing effect. As for that Teflon, don't worry, she's doing very well now. The power of her bloodline has been activated, and she has become a low-level demonkin warrior, undergoing strict training. When you return to Linton City next time, she should be able to come in handy. Also, you should have received the notice from the city council. War and turmoil are about to arrive, so it's best to prepare in advance. Remember, immediately come to the tower when you return to the city. I have something to tell you. Don't mix with those brainless nobles. The Mage Association has its own position. Staring at the secret imprint that was flickering at the bottom of the parchment, Andre's expression turned a little heavy. Although the letter did not contain much useful information, he could still feel the oppressive aura between the lines, as if a dark cloud was pressing down on him. Without a doubt, the mastermind behind the scenes was following the plan, pushing Linton City step by step into a bottomless abyss. Once the trade war began, the city's accumulated strength would rapidly weaken, and countless ships would be killed or captured by the pirates and Bakarov's navy. What would follow would be a decline in trade, and sea transportation would be completely cut off. And at most a year, the city would be in a predicament of lacking in living materials. As prices soared, All kinds of social conflicts that had been suppressed before would come to the fore, such as corruption, the polarization between the rich and the poor, the bankruptcy of merchants, the inability to honor bills, and so on. If the city hall couldn't pay the army enough due to insufficient tax revenue, a rebellion to overthrow the current ruling structure would be unavoidable. Andre could almost see the smug expression on the mastermind's face. Perhaps the mastermind had made similar arrangements in the other cities of the Green Sea Alliance, intending to take control of the southernmost trade alliance in one fell swoop. Thinking of this, his gaze suddenly became deep. He silently took off the stun ring on his left index finger and then put on the ring of the shifter beast. Instantly, white arcs of electricity shot out from his hand, making crackling sounds like bamboo burning. Even in the daytime, it was abnormally dazzling. Perfect, as expected of the work of an archmage. Whether it's the craftsmanship or the enchantment, there's not a single flaw. Compared to this, Andre glanced at the stun ring he just took off and shook his head with a bitter smile. Compared to this, my work is really crude. Looks like I need to practice making magic items. Having said that, he turned around and left the room, leaving Raven to make a mess of the food on the table. This clever bird seemed to be tired from flying. After eating and drinking, it directly lay on the table and took a nap. Its comfortable appearance made the maid standing next to it very jealous. One had to know that whether it was the snacks baked with honey, milk, eggs, and wheat flour, dried meat cooked with spices, or green tea that cost 60 gold coins per kilogram, they were all expensive luxuries. Most people would never be able to eat them in their lifetime. Now that they were being ruined by a bird, it would be strange if the maid felt good about it. But obviously, she didn't dare to do anything to Raven. After all, it was still a mage's magic pet. It might have some supernatural abilities, so she could only watch helplessly. Passing through the dark corridors of the castle, Andre went straight to the warehouse at the bottom of the castle. Just as he walked down the stairs, he heard the sound of weapons colliding and the rapid breathing of two women. Following the light from the torches, he could vaguely see that not far ahead, a woman with short brown hair and wearing leather armor was waving a rapier and a dagger, forcing Chloe into a corner. The cold gleam of the sharp blade was close to the girl's fragile throat several times. The chest of the tight clothes was even cut open, revealing a beautiful snow-white scenery. The short brown-haired woman's movements were very agile, and her reaction was ridiculously fast. Every time she attacked, the angle of her attack was very tricky. It was already not easy for Chloe to resist for so long. Seeing that his fiancée was sweating all over and was about to lose, Andre raised his hand and snapped his fingers. He smiled and said, "Reese, let's call it a day. It seems that you're indeed a very good teacher. You can actually make Chloe have a good fencing ability in such a short time. Here, this is the reward that you deserve." He gently threw the ring of vertigo that he had just eliminated. It drew a beautiful arc and accurately landed in the palm of his opponent. Chapter 197. As soon as the silver ring entered his hand, Reese sensed a trace of energy fluctuation from it. He exclaimed in surprise, "A magic item?" Thieves were usually very sensitive, especially those with rich experience. They could tell what was valuable and what wasn't with just their eyes, so they also had the ability to identify all kinds of items. It was just that they weren't as professional and accurate as mages. Andre smiled and nodded. "You have a good eye. This is a magic ring. It can shoot a level 0 arcane spell called Stun every day. It can catch the enemy off guard in close combat." "Wow, this is a big surprise. Thank you so much for your generosity." Reese put the ring on his middle finger and wiped it with his sleeve. As someone who often had to move alone, she knew how precious this seemingly insignificant ring was. It could save her life at a critical moment, so she couldn't hide her excitement. Chloe left her teacher behind and came to Andre's side. She ran her fingers through her long black hair and waved her rapier. "Dear, what do you think of my swordsmanship now? How many enemies can I deal with at once?" As she asked, she performed a few beautiful thrusts. Compared to half a month ago, she was like a completely different person. It had to be said that although this noble girl was a little out of line, her talent in combat was not bad. She had also learned some swordsmanship before, so once she found a suitable pattern for herself, her battle prowess increased by leaps and bounds. Although she could only defeat a few goblins at the moment, she already had some ability to protect herself. The rapier in her hand was a relic left behind by the Barcole. Whether it was the weight or the length, it was just right. Mithril was also mixed in when it was forged, so it was exceptionally light, sharp, and sturdy. Even iron armor could be easily pierced through with it. Andre didn't want to dampen the girl's enthusiasm. He shook his head with a smile and took out a handkerchief to wipe off the sweat on her face and neck. In particular, her wet white shirt stuck to her skin, showing off her seductive figure. It made him a little restless. Why are you just smiling and not saying anything? Could be that my level is too low. Chloe's mind was a little slow, and she didn't realize how attractive she was at the moment. She stood on her tiptoes and walked with the catwalk that she had learned recently, revealing a sexiness that didn't match her young age. Pooh! Reese, who was standing not far away, couldn't help but cover his mouth and laugh. He immediately raised his hands and shouted, "Don't look at me like that. I'll leave now, you guys continue." After saying that, she ran up the stairs like a gust of wind and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Chloe blinked and asked inexplicably, "What is she laughing at?" "Don't mind it too much. Rogues think differently from us normal people." In order to maintain their sharp reactions, they are more or less neurotic. "Let's go. You should go take a bath now and start learning magic." With that, Andre took off his cloak and draped it over the girl's body. As a person who valued privacy, he didn't want other men to see his fiancée's half-naked body. "Oh, I think I understand what's going on now." After the cloak was draped over her body, Chloe showed an expression of sudden realization. However, she didn't immediately tighten the cloak's belt. Instead, she deliberately pulled the collar lower, revealing the white, translucent cloth wrapped around her chest. She then deliberately stuck out her tongue and licked her lips seductively. "My dear, don't you want to do something now? We have at least 40 minutes to make good use of." As soon as he finished speaking, the girl threw away the cloak and pounced on him like an octopus, kissing him madly. At this moment, she was like a raging flame, completely dominated by lust. Waves of ecstasy came from her mouth. Andre could feel Crowley's scalding body, as well as the seductive scent emitted from the secretion of hormones. However, after kissing and caressing, he whispered into Crowley's ears, "Relax. Relax. Now isn't the time to do such things. You're not even 16 yet. You're too young." Huff, huff, huff. Chloe's heart was beating wildly. While gasping for breath, she raised her head and refuted. "You're about the same age as me. How can you say that I'm young? What's more, when Annie was my age, she already had 2 lovers. You're the only one I have." "Ha ha ha. You look so cute now." Andre laughed and hugged the girl tightly, gently stroking her silky black hair. "I'm not wrong at all. Whether it's mentally or physically, you're far from being mature. Early sexual activity is very harmful to women. Some serious cases may even lead to death due to excessive bleeding. So for safety's sake, you can't do it before you're 16. Although Aurère's upper-class society was very open, and many young people tasted the forbidden fruit at the age of 11, and some had children at the age of 13, he didn't want the girl in front of him to go through all this. Seeing that her seduction plan failed again, Chloe shrugged her shoulders. "Well, then we'll wait for 1 or 2 years. But I think we can do some warming up in advance." After saying that, she knelt down and crawled into Andre's robe. She grabbed a certain bloated sponge and swallowed it. Instantly, an indescribable pleasure spread through Andre's body. He couldn't help but shiver and subconsciously hug the girl's head with both hands. In the next 10 minutes, Chloe used a rather shaky technique to send her fiancé to the clouds. After a white translucent liquid was sprayed into her mouth, everything finally came to an end. Andre helped the girl up, took a deep breath, and asked with a bitter smile, "Where did you learn this from?" Hee. How is it? Is it comfortable?" "This is what I learned from my aunt's diary," when I peeked at it. Furthermore, there are many techniques that can make a man happy. I could try them out one by one in the future. Crowley wiped off the unknown liquid at the corner of his mouth and replied with his charming eyes. Hee, then I'll look forward to it. Hurry up and take a bath. The magic class will begin in half an hour. Today, I'll teach you how to construct a spell model in your brain. Let's see who can master the first level 0 Arcane spell between you and Beverly. After saying that, Andre raised his hand and patted the girl's perky butt. He turned around and walked toward the magic classroom and alchemy room on the second floor. Chapter 198. As the old butler Borg continuously transported batch after batch of alchemy equipment and raw materials, he chose the largest and most sturdy room in the castle and transformed it into an alchemy room. Normally, he would use it to make some potions and, at the same time, let Crowley and the little lowly gain some hands-on experience. Of course, this simple alchemy room could not be compared to the one in the Association of Sorcerers, which was equipped with magic protection. Similarly, it could not be compared to the secret room built by Ulysses. But in Andre's eyes, only this room, which was less than 100 square meters, was truly his own place. Every piece of equipment, every bottle of raw materials, everything was placed in the designated position by him. The layout of the room was completely different from most messy alchemy rooms. It revealed the atmosphere of a large-scale laboratory on Earth. Even the test tubes and beakers were strictly classified. Even if he closed his eyes, he could still find them. Gently pushing open the door, the first thing that came into view was a row of neatly arranged cabinets. The glass cabinets inside were filled with a large number of jars with labels. Some of them contained special plants, and some of them contained creepy insects. In the far right corner, there was a cage full of small house mice. In the middle was a rectangular test bench built with finger-thick bluestone slabs. Even if there was an explosion, it would not splash too much rubble. It could be said that Andre had spent at least 50,000 gold coins to build this alchemy room. 4 girls and 6 boys stood obediently at the door. They were selected from the entire Tuaze Valley and were relatively smart. The youngest was only 10 years old, and the oldest was no more than 13 years old. They usually helped with the chores in the castle and would sit in on every magic class. Obviously, Andre wanted to select the most outstanding among them to be the assistants in this alchemy room. After all, whether it was making potions or magic items, there were many steps needed, especially processing leather, carving wood, controlling the temperature of the fire, smelting metal, and so on, which did not require too much arcane magic. Any apprentice with a little bit of experience could do it. There was no need to do it personally. What he planned to do was to move the assembly line to Orire and apply it to alchemy. He would let the apprentices do the simple parts, while he only needed to be in charge of the most important parts. Andre glanced at the nervous children with his sharp eyes, then waved his hand and ordered, "Sit down. Open your notes and start reviewing. There's nothing new today, but I'll be holding a reading and writing test for the common language in a while. Anyone who fails will not be able to eat meat for a week." Perhaps it was because of his harsh tone, or perhaps the threat of food made the little ones feel a sense of crisis. In short, these children quickly took out their notebooks bound with parchment and began to flip through them. Each and every one of them widened their eyes, desperately trying to remember every letter and word in their minds. Seeing how focused they were, the corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. Once upon a time, he used to be like these children, sitting in a spacious and bright classroom to receive education, studying hard for endless exams every day. The only difference was that these children could use this knowledge to change their destinies in the future. In the end, he only managed to get a college degree. After graduation, he couldn't find a professional job at all. He could only throw himself into the competitive workplace and fight his way out. Not long after, the little lowly Beverly quietly slipped in through the door with thick books and notes in her arms. She didn't disturb the other children, but went straight to her own seat, neatly arranged the books, and stared at her mentor, as if asking when the class would start. Andre intimately stroked the little girl's long blonde hair, bent down and explained in a low voice, "Don't worry, just wait a few more minutes. When Chloe comes, we'll start. Take a look at the spells and gestures first. Today, I'll teach you a level 0 Arcana spell. Let's see who can learn it first." Spell? Oh my God, did I hear it wrong? You're finally willing to teach me a spell? Beverly covered her mouth and let out a cry of surprise. Her two big eyes filled with excitement and expectation. "Apprentice, Beverly has a very good impression of you. Intimacy level has increased to 80 points. Congratulations. You've completed the first stage of intimacy. Random reward, 1 level 4 Arcana scroll. Congratulations. You've obtained 1 Ice Storm magic scroll." Along with a large amount of information flashing in his vision, Andre discovered that a rolled-up parchment scroll had suddenly appeared in his palm. He didn't even have time to react to what was going on, and the whole process had already been completed. How wonderful! No matter how many times I experience it, it always gives me a feeling of disbelief. Andre muttered to himself in a low voice, while unrolling the scroll to check the spell stored in it. Relying on his powerful comprehension ability, he quickly had a rough understanding of it. Ice Storm, as the name implied, was to use the power of Arcana to create a large area of giant hailstones, which would cover the sky and earth and smash down, dealing a terrifying blow to the enemies within the area, at the same time causing severe frostbite. What was even more frightening was that as the level of the spell increased, the hailstones would become bigger and bigger, and could even reach a diameter of more than 1 meter. With the help of the acceleration of gravity, they could instantly smash a person into a meat patty. Just think about it. What would the effect of a brick thrown from the top of a 30-story building be if it hit someone? Therefore, the damage of the ice storm would only be more terrifying than that of a brick. In addition, the area of effect was very large, and it was basically impossible to dodge it all. Once one was hit, they would instantly be drowned in countless hailstones, and in just a few seconds, a person would be turned into a pile of meat. Without a doubt, this was a typical evocation spell. Like fireball and lightning, it pursued the ultimate destructive effect. Although it was powerful, it was not what he wanted the most. After all, while powerful spells were indeed powerful, mages weren't warriors whose brains were filled with muscles, nor were they greedy thieves. If there was a problem that could be solved with wisdom, it was best not to use violence. Sometimes illusions, charms, and intimidation could achieve better results. Those who frequently used evocation spells had a resounding nickname in the circle of mages, mage barbarians. As the name implied, they were barbarians in the magic world, and it was a derogatory term. Most of these fellows were obsessive-compulsive patients and paranoid maniacs. At the same time, they were also extremely dangerous and violent. Their temper could erupt at any time like a volcano without warning, catching everyone off guard. Chapter 199. However, Andre didn't think that he liked violence. Besides, he didn't need to learn too many powerful evocation spells. Instead, he was most interested in the enchantment spells, which could control the minds of other creatures, the transmutation spells, which could change the body shape, race, and bloodline of others, the illusion spells, which could be used to confuse opponents, and the incantation spells, which could be used to explore the infinite universe and other planes of existence. In fact, from the beginning, he didn't think of mages as a pure fighting profession. According to the description in the book, Magic Enlightenment, mages were more like researchers and explorers who pursued the truth. Powerful arcane spells were just byproducts of the research process. Compared to the grand and distant goal, they were nothing. Unfortunately, the mage barbarian thought the opposite. They believed that powerful spells that could completely destroy the opponent's body and soul were the ultimate goals of every mage. Although it wasn't the spell he wanted the most, Andre still carefully put it into the scroll box. After all, it was a level 4 spell. If he could copy a few more scrolls after learning it, it would be much easier in the future. Just as he put away the parchment that recorded Ice Storm, the door to the alchemy room was suddenly pushed open. Crowley changed into a corset and a lady's long skirt again. With her wet hair draped over her shoulders, she walked in with her high heels. The girl didn't hesitate and went straight to Beverly. She bent down and kissed the little girl's cheek. She smiled and asked, "Good afternoon, little smarty. How was your day?" "Not bad, especially after knowing that my mentor is going to teach me the first spell. It's so good," Beverly replied like a little adult. "Uh-huh. Then let's see who can learn the first spell first." Chloe stretched out her hand and pinched the little girl's nose, and a provocative smile appeared on her face. Beverly didn't back down and waved her little fist. "Okay, I'll bet a silver coin." Chloe smiled and rubbed the little girl's doll-like face. "Hee hee, that's your pocket money for a week. Don't cry when you lose." Andre smiled when he saw that the little girl and the little girl were at odds again. He picked up a bottle of silver liquid from the table and knocked on their heads. "All right, all of you stop when it's appropriate." Now, he carefully looked at the liquid in the bottle, focused his attention, and tried to communicate with it with the mana he obtained after meditation until his brain or soul received some kind of enlightenment. Then, the first level 0 spell slot would be born. It can let you feel the hidden essence in your heart, especially you, Beverly. This is because the first spell you form when you become an apprentice often indicates your inclination towards the school of magic. You must not be careless. "Don't worry, teacher. I definitely won't let you down," the little loli solemnly promised. "Let's start. I can't wait to master the first magic spell." Chloe's eyes were wide open as she urged in excitement. "Since that's the case, we'll do as you wish." After Andre finished speaking, he directly opened the cork and poured out all the liquid. These silver translucent substances were not bound by gravity as they normally would be. Instead, they flickered with white light and flowed in the air, forming complex patterns. Beverly was so surprised that she covered her mouth. She couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh my God, it was simply too beautiful, simply incredible. That's right, this is the most beautiful substance I've ever seen." "What is it?" Chloe tried to touch the glowing liquid with her finger, but she quickly discovered that when her finger touched it, she couldn't feel anything, as if everything in front of her was just an illusion. Andre took a deep breath and softly replied, "Mana. This is the purest and most primitive energy that exists in every corner of the world, and even the entire universe. It is said that only powerful spellcasters above level 15 have the ability to directly control it. Calm down, carefully observe, and feel it with your heart. It will reveal some inconceivable things to you." Generally speaking, there were only 2 ways for an ordinary person to become an apprentice. One was to take the risk and try to construct the first spell model in one's mind, and forcibly use one's own mana to open the first spell slot. However, as the saying goes, everything is difficult at the beginning. Generally speaking, there was only one outcome for doing this, and that was that one's entire head would be squeezed into pieces with a bang. The success rate was definitely not more than 15%. Apart from this, the remaining method was to find a level 7 mage to draw out a little of the mana from one's body and let the apprentice feel the essence of the primitive mana, and then comprehend what belonged to him. The advantage of doing this was that it was safe. However, not to mention that there were very few mages above level 7, very few mages were willing to take the initiative to draw out their own mana. After all, just making this small bottle in front of him had taken more than 400 experience points from Andre, which was equivalent to making a low-level magic item. Considering the selfish nature of most mages, it was estimated that only mentors who were especially concerned about their apprentices would choose to do this. Obviously, he was one of them. Pure primitive mana symbolized chaos and infinite possibilities, and all the known arcane spells came from it. It was said that in ancient times, some intelligent creatures discovered the existence of mana through observing all kinds of strange supernatural phenomena, and researched many spells based on these phenomena. With the passage of time, they gradually evolved and formed the current 8 major schools and 1 general school. Chloe and Beverly were slowly lost in the silver-white radiance, and their pupils began to dilate, falling into a sluggish state. They didn't even realize that their mouths were inadvertently making some strange sounds. Andre knew that this pair of Lolas had been attracted by the primitive mana, and if they were lucky, they would be able to find a pattern in a few minutes to a few hours and comprehend their first arcane spell. He didn't choose to continue waiting in the same place. Instead, he picked up the exam questions that had been prepared on the table and went to the children who were listening at the side. He distributed the parchments filled with exam questions and at the same time confiscated the children's notes. He lowered his voice and warned them, as usual, no copying each other, no making any noise, and no making any gestures. In short, put away those little tricks and finish all the questions before this hourglass runs out. Now I declare start. Chapter 200. As soon as he finished speaking, both boys and girls quickly picked up their quills, dipped them in ink, and focused on writing the answers. Andre nodded in satisfaction. He turned the hourglass upside down and placed it at the corner of the table so that everyone could see it clearly. Apart from the sound of the quill rubbing against the parchment, the only sound that could be heard in the alchemy room was the faint sound of breathing. Andre turned back to the experiment bench and took out the ice storm scroll he'd just obtained. He began to carefully analyze the spell structure. Now that the mastermind had bared his fangs, he urgently felt that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, let alone defeat him, even protecting those closest to him would be a problem. After all, the shadow that loomed over Linton City and the entire Green Sea Alliance wasn't just one or two people, but an enormous organization. They were powerful, had a clear division of labor, and were numerous. Every one of them was an elite. What was even more frightening was that these people usually hid in unknown corners. Even the tip of the iceberg was enough to make one shudder. As a typical conspiracy theorist, Andre believed that the mastermind's goal was definitely not as simple as it seemed. There had to be something else behind the seizure of power. However, he couldn't tell with the information he had so far, so he had to make more preparations. Otherwise, the roles of hunter and prey could be swapped at any time. After all, it wasn't as if he hadn't seen wild beasts rush out of traps and bite hunters to death in lonely mountain town. Thus, it was always good to have a backup plan. Even if the worst came to worst, he could still escape safely. Andre, who was fully immersed in his study of magic, easily forgot the passage of time. Before he knew it, an hour and a half had passed. Even though he'd already learned 2 level 4 arcane spells, the new spell still took up a lot of his energy. With a flash of blinding white light, the Ice Storm scroll was successfully copied into the spellbook. Feeling the chill emanating from the pages, he finally let out a sigh of relief. He gently stroked the pages and muttered to himself, "There are quite a lot of arcane spells. Looks like I'll have to start preparing a new spellbook. Otherwise, the 60 pages will be filled up in no time." What a headache. A few months ago, the necromancer Ulysses had told him that this spellbook could only store 60 spells at most. Now, more than half of it had been used up, and Andre's desire to learn new arcane spells was becoming more and more insufficient. Therefore, he had to start collecting materials. This time, he had to get it done in one go. It would be best if he could get some dragon skin that could store spells above level 7. Of course, this dragon skin did not refer to the real dragons that soared in the sky. It referred to the subspecies of dragons that had the bloodline of dragons, such as pterosaurs, battle mounts, dinosaurs, dragon turtles, giant crocodiles, and other powerful scaled creatures. After all, in Ori, anything with the word dragon in their name was not easy to deal with. Basically, they were either tough, had strong vitality, or had special abilities. Some even had both. Not only could their skin be used to make spell books, but it was also a material for high-quality armor. Shields, armors, helmets, gloves, bracers, boots, belts, it could be said that these tough skins had a wide range of uses. In addition to the scarcity of production, nobles and ordinary adventurers were sparing no effort to collect them. It was extremely difficult to get a few pieces of them, and the price was extremely outrageous. Often, half a meter of them could be sold for tens of thousands of gold coins. Just when Andre was holding the spellbook and thinking about how to get a piece of dragon skin, a a strange sound suddenly sounded in the room. Bang, 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 bang. The original flowing magic power formed into two spheres. One of them was very calm and stopped in front of Chloe, while the other one began to show a dark green color, boiling like boiling water and emitting a pungent smell. The one who caused this change in the original magic power was none other than Beverly, who was unprecedentedly focused. At this moment, she was constantly chanting an incantation that no one could understand. Her two hands drew a complicated pattern in the air, and her small body faintly formed a tiny magic vortex. Obviously, the girl had comprehended something from the energy and was trying hard to construct a complete spell model in her brain. Seeing this, Andre hurriedly and noiselessly approached her, preparing to deal with any unexpected situations. One had to know that even if it was a rank 0 arcane spell cast by an apprentice, it would still be very destructive to ordinary people. He had to be careful to avoid unnecessary tragedies. Aback, Celine, like intermittent incantations kept coming out of the little Loli's mouth. After a few minutes, her forehead was covered with dense beads of sweat. She raised her right hand high and pointed at the window in front of her. In an instant, that dark green liquid shrank into a fingernail-sized pellet and flew out with a whoosh, accurately hitting the window frame with a bang. The unknown liquid was like a strong acid, corroding a large piece of wood in a short few seconds, and the sizzling sound was incessant. Andre almost immediately recited the name of this rank 0 arcane spell in his mind, acid sputtering. It belonged to the incantation branch, and through connecting with the extra-dimensional space, it could summon a highly corrosive acid bullet, causing a fatal blow to the target. Perhaps it was nothing in the eyes of a high-level professional, but for an ordinary person, it was enough to corrode a large piece of skin and flesh. If the treatment was not timely, it would be fatal in less than half a minute. Without a doubt, this little girl's magic talent leaned towards the incantation branch. Usually, people who chose this branch subconsciously desired to dominate others and hoped that others would unconditionally obey them. Generally speaking, they were born leaders, but this leader treated their summoned creatures much better than their companions. This was because the incantation branch used spatial channels to summon all kinds of things to deal with the enemy. There were inanimate objects such as spiderweb, grease, mage armor, and so on. There were also living creatures such as summon monsters 1 to 9, summon demons, summon devils, summon heavenly creatures, and so on. They could even let the body pass through the dimensional channel to another place. Generally speaking, the incantation branch was the branch with the most arcane spells among the 8 branches, and it was also the branch that was most widely used. Many mages chose to specialize in this branch. Chapter 201. Control, Summoning, Teleportation, Defense. Incantation arcane spells covered a lot of areas. The only drawback was that they had to give up on evocation arcane spells, because those elemental damage seriously lack variation. In the eyes of incantation mages, it wasn't worth wasting time on, and it wasn't reliable at all in battle. Everyone who had some understanding of magic knew that among all the arcane spells with the strongest power, the most terrifying damage, and the most frightening appearance were evocation arcane spells. Once they gave up this school of magic, it meant that their lethality was insufficient. Just when Andre was considering the gains and losses, Beverly suddenly took a deep breath and instantly came back to her senses. Looking at the window that had been corroded by the strong acid, she cried out in surprise, "Oh, heavens! Don't tell me this was done by me." As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly felt her 2 legs go soft, and her whole body was completely powerless. She was about to fall on the hard ground. Andre, who was standing at the side, didn't say anything, but held the little Loli in his arms and smiled with gratification. "Congratulations! Now you are finally a real magic apprentice. Tell me, what kind of feeling does it feel like to roam in the world of magic?" "Oh, It's like constantly shuttling through many worlds and also seeing many strange creatures and sceneries. The feeling is really wonderful. Beverly opened her two big eyes and blinked as she spoke of her own feelings. Her incantation school was so obvious that it didn't even need to be tested, as it could be seen at a glance. It must be known that all those specialized mages had to give up all the arcane spells of School of Magic. They could gain an extra spell slot for each level. This was because giving up a School of Magic meant that they could gather their scattered experience, and when they used the specialized School of Magic, the magic power would also increase. As a person who became a mage by cheating, Andre had no way to know what his own talent was, except for helplessness. He had no choice but to become a versatile mage, which meant that he didn't give up on any School of Magic. In the past, he did not know whether the advantages outweighed the disadvantages or the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. However, after seeing the enlightenment that the little fellow had gained today, he finally realized what he had done wrong. In Orire, most of the mages had their own specializations. Generalists were either idiots who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, or losers with no talent at all. Otherwise, they would more or less be able to feel the talent hidden in their body when they received their first level, 0 spell slot, or when they were promoted from an apprentice to an official mage. But Andre, on the other hand, had directly used some inexplicable system to skip the initial part. So now, they could only watch helplessly. The only thing he could do now was to pray that the strange tattoo on his hand would be as powerful as before. Otherwise, it would be a huge loss. Minter, I suddenly feel so tired and sleepy. Beverly yawned as she lowered her head and almost couldn't open her eyes. The Tier 0 Arcana technique just now had exhausted all of her magic power and consciousness energy. She was finally unable to hold on any longer, and her eyelids began to droop. Don't worry, it's just that my brain is too tired. Go to sleep. After a good sleep, you'll be able to return to normal. As he spoke, Andre kissed the little Loli's cheeks, gently placed her on the sofa behind him, and then covered her with a blanket. Just as he finished doing all this, a large amount of information suddenly appeared in his vision. Congratulations! Your apprentice Beverly has successfully crossed the first threshold. Because the apprentice saw the vast and boundless universe when she was observing the primal magic energy, her intelligence attribute has permanently increased by 1 point. Now, her intelligence has reached 16 points, and she has also learned the level 0 Arcana technique, acid sputtering. Apprentice Beverly has officially become a level 0 apprentice. You have completed the first step of nurturing. You have obtained a chance to draw a reward. Do you wish to begin immediately? Begin. Andre didn't hesitate at all and immediately chose to draw a reward. He couldn't wait to see what good things could be obtained from nurturing an apprentice, whether it was a magic scroll or a magic item. Randomly drawing a reward. Congratulations! You have obtained a chance to randomly obtain a special bloodline. Attention! Attention! Detected that your body contains a thin bloodline of a creature from another plane. Do you wish to activate it? If you choose to activate it, the randomly drawn bloodline will automatically strengthen the original bloodline. If you choose to give up, then the new bloodline will completely replace the hidden bloodline in your body. Bloodline of a creature from another plane. Andre was shocked and subconsciously lowered his head to look at his own body, carefully searching for any characteristics that didn't belong to a human. But unfortunately, he didn't know if it was because it was too thin, but there wasn't anything special about his body. After a fruitless search, he frowned and cursed in a low voice. Damn it, this is really a difficult choice. After all, a bloodline wasn't something that could be taken or thrown away as one wished. Once it took effect, it would definitely accompany one for life. If he had a dragon bloodline, he would naturally be extremely lucky. He could obtain additional strength and, at the same time, would not be ostracized by human society. But if he had a demon bloodline or a devil bloodline, then he would be finished. Eunice's tragic childhood was the best example. Hesitation, conflict, One bloodline couldn't be confirmed, while the other bloodline was random. No matter which one he chose, in the end, it all depended on luck. After hesitating for a few minutes, Andre decided to gamble on the bloodline hidden in his body. In his opinion, his parents and siblings in this world didn't show the slightest bit of evil tendencies. They could even be said to be good people. The possibility of him having a demon bloodline or a devil bloodline was very small. At the very least, it was more reliable than randomly choosing a bloodline. Activate bloodline in body. Confirmed. Activating bloodline. Attention! The unknown bloodline has been activated and is currently transforming the body. Without any warning, a flame suddenly burst out of Andre's body, instantly burning all his clothes apart from his magic items. The hair and eyebrows that had been burned off in the previous battle rapidly grew back, especially his hair. In just a few seconds, it had grown by 10 centimeters. However, this wasn't ordinary hair. Its color was very bright, like a ball of burning flames, constantly floating on top of his head. A large amount of fire elements gathered together, causing the hair to stand up one by one. At this moment, his head was like a huge torch. No matter how he moved, the hair wouldn't fall down. Chapter 202. Body Modification Complete. Unknown Bloodline Detected. Descendant of Fire Elementals. Current Bloodline Purity Level 2. Body Attribute Adjustment. Intelligence increased by 2 points. Charm decreased by 2 points. You have obtained Dark Vision. Even in a pitch-black situation, you can still see around 20 meters in front of you. You have obtained Fire Resistance. You have obtained the innate ability Fire Enhancement. All fire spells are increased by 20%. You have obtained the innate ability Fire Extension. Descendant of Fire Elementals can release their elemental nature once a day, using flames to burn all enemies within 5 meters. Due to the awakening of the elemental bloodline, the experience required to level up will be increased. Attention! The nature of the fire elementals will slowly affect your personality in the future. For example, you will be impulsive, easily angered, and hot-blooded. Name: Androrace, descendant of fire elementals. Bloodline Purity Level 2. Alignment: Neutral Good, moving towards absolute neutrality. Attributes: Strength, 7 Agility, 17 Vitality, 8 Intelligence, 21 Perceptive Sense, 12 Charm, 9 Profession. Level 7 Mage Experience required to level up. 30,000/59,000 number of memorizable arcane spells. Level 0 for Level 1. 6 Level 2. 4+1. Effective Mage Badge. Level 3. 3 Level 4. 2 Following a series of information and attribute adjustments, Andre was surprised to find that his brain had suddenly become smarter. Due to the increase in intelligence, he had one more Level 1 spell, and there seemed to be some kind of energy in his body that could directly communicate with the fire elementals. His appearance had also changed slightly, especially his hair and eyebrows, which were emitting a gorgeous orange color. Even his pupils had changed from dark blue to orange, looking very dazzling. He dared to bet that if he walked out without any concealment, the rate of turning heads would definitely be 200%, because the shock in the eyes of the children was enough to prove this point. Everything had its pros and cons. Apart from the above benefits, there were also many disadvantages. One of the most annoying was that the experience required to level up as a mage increased by 400 points, which was simply terrible. Furthermore, his charm attribute had also dropped to the level of an ordinary person. It was as if there was a raging flame burning in his heart, and his entire being was filled with passion. Obviously, this was the effect of the bloodline on one's personality mentioned in the message. This also meant that he could no longer remain as calm as before, and his emotions would fluctuate slightly more. Phew! Alright, overall, there are still more benefits, but I have to find a way to cover up these obvious features, otherwise it will definitely cause a lot of trouble. As he spoke, Andre gently touched his hair that was standing on end, and a hint of helplessness appeared on his face. Just as he was rubbing his chin and considering if he should shave off his hair and eyebrows, a loud bang suddenly rang out in the room. Boom! The ball of silver liquid in front of Chloe exploded, dispersing into countless tiny particles before disappearing into the air. Then, the sound of breathing reverberated in the room, as if someone had pointed a microphone at their nose and mouth. After only a few seconds, her pupils began to refocus. She quickly woke up and let out an ear-piercing scream. Ah! Bang! 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 All the glass in the alchemy room shattered, and some of the lower-quality beakers, flasks, and test tubes had cracks of varying degrees. Other than the little lowly who had already fallen asleep, the others hurriedly covered their ears. Some of the children who did not cover their ears in time even rolled their eyes and fainted. Damn it! This is a illusory sound. Andre tightly covered his ears as he gritted his teeth and cursed in a low voice. Amongst the many rank 0 arcane spells, illusory sound was one of the hardest to deal with. From a certain point of view, it was even more troublesome than the infamous flash spell. The latter only required one to predict the opponent's casting action and close one's eyes, while the former would cause one to jump in fright even if one covered their ears. This spell could amplify the target's voice or create illusory sounds. The range was between the volume of 4 to 20 people. Not only could it be used to confuse the enemy, but it could also make people tremble when they were caught off guard. Those who were timid might directly faint from fright. Most importantly, it could not be defended at all. One could only be mentally prepared in advance. Without a doubt, Crowley's talent in magic was in the illusion department. This department was good at deceiving the senses and mind of the opponent. For example, making the opponent see illusions that didn't exist, turning a blind eye to real things. In front of the illusion department's magic, hearing, sight, smell, touch, taste, and even dead memories could be fake. Some advanced spells could even confuse a specific person, and the people around him would not be aware of it at all. Of course, as a bard, Chloe did not need to choose a school to specialize in. However, this talent would affect her choice of arcane spells in the future, as well as her learning speed. In fact, with the success of the first level 0 arcane spell, this seemingly weak noble girl had already become a trainee bard, although her fighting ability and professional skills had been enhanced. The effect of illusion sound was not long. It only lasted for a few seconds and then disappeared completely. Only the broken glass everywhere told the story of what had just happened. When everyone in the room was still shocked by the damage caused by the sound, the door was suddenly kicked open. The female thief, Lesty, rushed in first and shouted nervously, "What's wrong? What happened? Miss Chloe, are you okay?" The other two guards followed closely behind her. The second man rushed in and saw Andre's strange appearance at first glance. He shouted in a hoarse voice, "Oh, oh, 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 my God, the God of guards above, over there. And Andre, Mr. Andre, may I ask if it's you?" The last guard who came in asked cautiously. Although the flame-like hair and eyebrows looked quite shocking, the facial features and body shape did not change too much. As long as one looked at it carefully, they could still tell it was him. "Of course it's me. Who else do you think it is?" Andre shrugged with a smile and replied in a half-joking tone. He noticed that the guards' hands were already on the hilts of their swords, and their faces were also very nervous. If there was any movement, they would immediately attack. Therefore, he wanted to ease the atmosphere and prevent unnecessary misunderstandings. Otherwise, it would not be good if anyone got hurt. Chapter 203. After all, many mercenaries didn't even know how to read, and their level of knowledge was even worse. It was probably very difficult for them to distinguish between special bloodlines. For them, when they encountered something they weren't familiar with, there were usually two ways. One was to turn around and run, while the other was to try and kill it. However, judging from the reactions of the three guards, it was obvious that they intended to choose the latter. Liz first glanced at the broken glass on the ground, then looked at the window frame that was corroded by the strong acid. He asked with a face full of shock, "My God, you didn't do some terrible experiment, did you?" Andre spread out his hands. "All right, I admit that there was a small situation just now, but it's far from being dangerous. Look, isn't everyone fine? Yes. Those poor children just fainted. They didn't have their stomachs cut open, nor did they lose an arm or a leg. I think they must have been blessed by the goddess of luck. The corner of Lys' mouth twitched as he spoke, and he quickly walked to Chloe's side. He carefully touched the girl's body to make sure that she wasn't injured. Don't look, I guarantee that she's fine. Also, don't think that magic is so scary. This is just an apprentice's initiation. Although it looks scary, it's actually not that dangerous. Andre really couldn't stand the strange looks of the guards, so he had to open his mouth to explain. These guys obviously misunderstood what had just happened. Their nervous looks made it seem as if magic was a scourge, and every inch of their muscles was extremely tense. Just as the two were talking, Chloe suddenly took a deep breath and instantly came back to her senses. Her breathing quickened as she looked around. She immediately jumped up and shouted excitedly, "Did I do all of this? This is great. I did it. I finally succeeded in learning my first arcane spell." Looking at the excited look on the girl's face, Andre smiled and nodded. "That's right. You're now an apprentice bard. As long as you have 2 rank 0 arcane spell slots and master more than 4 rank 0 spells, you'll be a true rank 1 bard. Of course, you can't fall behind in other aspects." Huh. I knew that one day I'd be a great adventurer. In the future, we can explore the deserted forest together, excavate ancient ruins, look for mysterious and terrifying monsters, and defeat powerful and evil enemies. Chloe's nerves were now extremely excited, and her eyes were constantly shining as she spoke of her dreams. The whole process lasted for a full 5 minutes. As her passion subsided, she finally realized that something was wrong. She asked Reese with a puzzled expression, "What's wrong? Why aren't you talking?" "My dear young lady, your reaction is quite slow. Look, you'll know when you turn around." Reese pointed behind the girl. "Behind me?" Crowley turned around in a daze and instantly covered his mouth in shock. His eyes widened as he muttered to himself, "The goddess of dawn, Lucia, bless me. It's so cool and beautiful." Hearing this, Reese immediately sighed helplessly. "Ah, my dear lady, this isn't the main point, is it? Normally, shouldn't you ask what happened first?" Even though she had been together for a period of time, she was already used to the noble girl in front of her. Occasionally, she would show off her natural naivety, but now it seemed that her mental state was not quite the same as a normal person's. What does it matter? No matter what he looks like, he'll still be my lover. Most importantly, I want to touch that flame-like hair with my own hands. Saying this, Chloe quickly ran forward in her high heels. She stretched out her right hand, carefully trying to touch the hair swaying in the wind. Andre was amused by the girl's curious and scared expression. He raised his hand and gently pinched her nose. "You're such a curious baby. Touch it, it's fine." Although the fire elemental energy in the hair is very abundant, it's not enough to burn the skin. "Really?" Chloe was obviously a little doubtful. She touched the hair with her fingers and hurriedly pulled back. However, when she realized that the hair that seemed to be emitting a faint light was not as tall as she thought, she directly stretched out both hands and used her 10 fingers to slowly move up from the ends of the hair. She exclaimed loudly, "Wow, it's actually warm. It feels so good to touch. How'd you do it?" "It's bloodline. My ancestor should have had a close connection with the fire elemental world. It might be a special contract, or it might have undergone some special transformation and modification. In any case, a part of his special ability was passed down from generation to generation. I just happened to activate it, and it turned into what it is now." In fact, Andre was not lying. He only concealed a part of it. He did not want anyone to know that he came from another world, and even more so, did not want to attract unnecessary trouble. After all, mages had always been filled with a strong curiosity towards exploring unknown worlds, especially those great mages who had mastered interplanar teleportation magic. As long as they heard similar news, they would immediately rush over. When that time came, it would be impossible to escape even if you wanted to. Although the civilization of Orire was still in a rather backward state, it was very aggressive in terms of invasion. As early as thousands of years ago, during the most glorious era of the magic civilization, the legendary mages had led armies to conquer countless planes. Some of the smaller half-planes were still preserved to this day. If they were not the secret bases of some powerful forces, then they were the private property of some of the mages. In addition, 600 years ago, in order to prevent the gods from disturbing the world again, the High God cast a huge isolation spell. This made the already difficult exploration of other planes even more difficult. So who knew what the great mages of the evil faction would do? Fire, elemental bloodline. So you're now a half-elemental creature? Chloe had obviously received a certain degree of magic education. She called out a professional term as soon as she opened her mouth. Andre nodded slightly and explained with a smile, "In theory, yes. However, because my bloodline is too old, even if it's activated now, it only accounts for 20% of it. The rest is mostly human. Otherwise, my skin would turn red like burning coal, and all the hair, including my hair, would be completely replaced by flames. When I'm angry, my eyes can even spit out flames." Chapter 204. Damn it, so you've obtained some innate abilities? Liz was about to go crazy with jealousy. In her eyes, Andre, being able to become a mage, was already one in 1,000 lucky ones. Now that he had awakened his bloodline, how could ordinary people live? Not many, only 2 or 3. As for what they are, I can't tell you. I plan to leave them for the crucial moment to give the enemy a surprise. Remember, you're not allowed to mention this to anyone, or else. At this point, Andre's eyes suddenly became sharp. Liz hurriedly raised his hands and guaranteed, "Please be assured, I didn't see or hear anything. My 2 companions are the same." "Very good. I like smart people like you. Now, help me send the fainted children to the other rooms, and then let the servants clean this place up. I need to find a place to test out the new amount I've obtained." After saying this, Andre directly picked up the little lowly Beverly and turned to walk towards the door. When he passed by the study table, he dismissed all the restless children. Chloe lifted her skirt and followed closely behind. The 2 of them, one in front and one behind, quickly disappeared at the end of the corridor. After the 2 of them had walked far away, Liz took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "How enviable. If only I could obtain a spell-like ability one day." It wasn't just Liz himself. The eyes of the other 2 male guards were somewhat red as well. One of them even lowered his voice and muttered, "What a shameful waste. This kind of bloodline should only be awakened in warriors or knights. It's not very useful for a mage." His nagging resonated with his companion beside him, and the other guard hurriedly nodded. "Buddy, you're right. Think about the famous Dragon Knight in the history of Lincoln City. He awakened the bloodline of the Golden Dragon, and when he charged, the surface of his body was covered with tough scales. Even the enemy's crossbow couldn't penetrate it. Moreover, he lived for more than 350 years. It said that he had intimate relations with tens of thousands of noble ladies. If only my ancestors had such a special bloodline. Don't dream. Do you think this is the era of a few thousand years ago when many races lived together? Dwarves, halflings, and pygmies have become rare, let alone creatures from other planes. The elves have also hidden in the islands of shelter in the depths of the sea. Only monsters like goblins, orcs, and kobolds are hiding. Do you wish to inherit their bloodline? I think it's better to forget about it. Just as the guards had said, due to the rapid expansion of human civilization in the past 1,000 years, most of the other intelligent races had adopted an attitude of avoidance. Among them, the elves had chosen to flee overseas, leaving only a few branches in the entire continent. Moreover, all of them were hiding in the deserted forests and grasslands. Only when they needed resources would they appear as envoys or caravans in the big cities. The dwarves mostly chose to go underground in the mines where they built maze-like pits. Every year, they would trade with the nearby human countries. Occasionally, a few dwarven blacksmiths or adventurers would settle down in the human world. As for the halflings and pygmies, they got along well with the humans. However, the halflings and pygmies were always thieving, and the pygmies' pranks and whims were even more troublesome. Moreover, their growth cycle was much longer than that of humans, so when humans began to rapidly reproduce, their proportion in the population naturally decreased. Linton City was located at the southern port, and there were no mines around it. It was normal to not see any dwarves, but there were still some pygmies and halflings. In the Linton City Wizard Association, there was a pygmy illusionist, and he was a senior member of the association who had reached as high as level 9. It had to be said that these little fellows, who were between 90 centimeters and 1 meter tall, were very smart. They were especially good at inventing and creating. Even the stupidest among them could become qualified craftsmen, scholars, and architects. No matter where they went, they would be welcomed by the local upper class. Of course, this welcome was limited to the technology they brought and the value they could create. It did not include excessive curiosity and pranks. As for the halflings, well, these fellows, who were even shorter than pygmies, could be called mobile disasters. They would rather cause a lot of trouble than fall into boredom. It was common knowledge that halflings were very bold. They did not abide by law and order, and would often steal one or two things without the permission of their owners. Even worse, they did not have the habit of saving money at all. They especially liked to eat and enjoy. Even if they stole a large sum of money, they would spend it all in a very short period of time. This also meant that almost every halfling could be a habitual thief, and they would never be able to change. In the dirtiest, messiest, and worst back streets of the slums, halfling pickpockets could be seen everywhere. Some of them even belonged to gangs. Black Lily Bonnie had a few of them, but these little fellows were not very well liked. This was because they could not control their desire to steal. Sometimes, they would unknowingly reach their hands into the pockets of their bosses, with Andre activating the fire elemental bloodline. The two Lolas also learned the first arcane spell in their lives. In the following days, they either meditated or learned. In particular, Chloe, who always wanted to go adventuring in the forest, was crazily training herself in all kinds of skills, such as picking locks, stealth, swordsmanship, acting, disguising, talking skills, playing musical instruments, identifying and using magic items from 6 o'clock in the morning to bathing and sleeping at night. There was no rest at all. Her originally white and tender hands and feet had blisters, but she did not cry out in pain. She gritted her teeth and persevered. If it was not for Andre massaging her muscles every day after she fell asleep, she would have completely fainted from exhaustion. As the saying goes, no pain, no gain. When the first half of March was about to come to an end, Chloe finally learned the first piece of music full of magical power, Inspire Courage. Its function was as the name suggested. When she started playing, all the allies who heard it would feel courage from their hearts. It could be used to boost the morale of the allies and make them immune to some spells that affected the mind. However, Chloe could only play it once a day with the amount of magical power stored in her body. After using it up, she would have to rest for 8 hours before recovering. Since Inspire Courage could be used together with Phantom Sound to maintain the morale of thousands of people at once, it could be applied to the army to a certain extent. Andre almost immediately thought of this point. He was going to wait for the private army to complete their training before taking it out to find a goblin or kobold tribe to try it out. Chapter 205. The simple village life always made it easy for people to forget the passage of time. Unknowingly, it was already the 15th of March. Andre had completely forgotten that he still had an agreement with the shrine. At this moment, he was pressing on the young widow's body with all his might. After more than 40 minutes of vigorous exercise, he finally injected his essence into the young widow's body and stopped panting. Elsa hugged her lover tightly. Her white face and neck were full of red. Her snow-white thighs were wrapped around her waist. Her body was trembling nonstop, and it took a few minutes for her to calm down. She held Andre's face and kissed it affectionately. Then she asked softly, "What's wrong with you recently? It feels like your desire has increased a lot." If this goes on, I might get pregnant. It's because of the fire elemental bloodline. It made my character a little more emotional, passionate, impulsive, and hot-blooded. These feelings that were usually suppressed are now surging out like a tide. Fortunately, it's far from enough to affect my rationality. Otherwise, it would be troublesome. Andre turned over and lay naked on the bed with a bitter smile on his face. It had been more than 10 days since he activated the fire elemental bloodline. He finally felt the change in his thinking, especially the caution that had settled down in his previous life. Some of the characteristics that belonged to a young person were emerging. Now that the bloodline purity was only at level 2, it already had such a big impact. If it was raised to level 5, perhaps even the way of thinking would have a huge change. Obviously, this change was not what Andre wanted. So he had made up his mind that unless he found a solution, he would not increase the bloodline purity. This bloodline purity was not suitable for mages at all. On the contrary, it was more suitable for warriors. After all, a hot temper could help warriors perform better in battle. Berserkers and barbarians could rely on the accumulation of anger to activate a kind of ability called berserk. In a short period of time, their physical fitness would be greatly enhanced. Opponents of the same level would not be able to resist at all. I see. It seems that I have to prepare some contraceptive measures. Otherwise, at most 2 months, something will definitely happen. I don't want others to know about our relationship. It would be too embarrassing, Elsa said as she wiped the mucus from her lower body with a handkerchief. Although these few days were the fastest days since her husband's death, and sometimes she even felt that she was in love, she knew that this kind of thing must not be exposed. Otherwise, all kinds of rumors and slanders would immediately follow. After all, other than those notorious guys, most people still cherish their reputation very much, especially a widowed woman who lived at home. Andre raised his arm and gently stroked the young widow's thigh. He smiled and said, "Elsa, you're really a kind and virtuous woman. If I was born 10 years earlier, I would have definitely married you. As for the pregnancy, don't worry too much. I've already calculated my menstrual cycle. As long as it's not pulled out, it's a safe period. You're really good at sweet-talking, but I have to go now. You know it's daytime now. Once Beverly finds that I'm missing, she will definitely be suspicious. She's getting more and more mischievous. I can't handle her anymore." As for the matter of her daughter becoming a mage apprentice, Elsa was pleasantly surprised but also distressed. After all, as an ordinary person, her intelligence was simply not enough to deal with the little lowly whose intelligence was as high as 16 points. Now, with her many years of life experience, she could barely handle it. But as the little girl's knowledge increased, it was only a matter of time before she was caught. Hee, don't worry about that little girl. She's busy meditating, researching new spells, reading books, and practicing concocting potions every day. For the time being, she doesn't have time. Before Andre finished his words, there was a sudden knock on the door of the room. Bang, bang, bang. Elsa, who had a guilty conscience, was so scared that she shivered. She didn't have time to put on her clothes and hid herself under the blanket. Before she could hide properly, the voice of a servant came from outside. "Sir, outside the castle, there's a group of people who claim to be from the Church of the Goddess of Dawn, Lucia. The female priest in the lead is called Clarice. She said that she had an agreement with you. There are only 6 of them in total, and all of them are wearing armor. They're basically beautiful ladies. Would you like to lower the drawbridge?" The Church of the Goddess of Dawn. Andre suddenly recalled that last month, he seemed to have made an agreement with the other party in the middle of this month to explore an underground city in the depths of the border forest. Ignoring the smell of women in the room, he hurriedly got up and put on his robe, covering his orange hair with a hood. He then opened a crack in the door and directly went through it. He then casually closed the door, cleared his throat, and asked, "These ladies are now at the entrance of the castle?" The servant didn't dare to delay and hurriedly bowed and answered, "Yes, sir. They're at the main entrance of the castle waiting for your reply." After saying that, he carefully glanced at the crack in the door. In fact, the moment he opened the door, he smelled a special smell in the room. It was a smell that only men and women who had intimate activities and secreted large amounts of hormones would emit. At the same time, he secretly wondered which woman was so lucky to actually climb into the bed of this young and handsome noble. If it was a maid, it would be best to quickly establish a good relationship with her. Maybe he could take advantage of this opportunity to get some benefits. In fact, in the Oleo continent, the maids of the noble families were equivalent to tools to vent their lust. They would even share them with their friends, especially in the relatively isolated north. Some boorish nobles would order the host of a banquet to provide delicious maids, and use them as an important entertainment for the banquet. Most of the maids who came from peasant families rarely rejected intimate activities with noble men. More often than not, they would take the initiative to seduce them. After all, compared to the peasants in the countryside who didn't even take a bath for a few months, the nobles were at least much cleaner and could enjoy a little of the so-called romantic atmosphere occasionally. Of course, in the end, the maids would be able to obtain rich rewards after giving their bodies. First, they could get rid of the heavy physical labor and become a manager among the servants. Second, when they were married, the noblemen who had sex with them would pay a sum of money as dowry. No noble would deny this, because if they did, they would soon be despised and ridiculed by the whole circle of nobles. They would never be able to raise their heads again. Finally, if they were pregnant with a noble's illegitimate child, these maids would be qualified to choose a good husband because the peasants would fight to marry them. Chapter 206. Although it sounded inconceivable, that was the truth. To an ordinary farmer, it was a glorious thing to be the adoptive father of a child with noble blood. Similarly, a woman who had been slept with by a noble must be a good woman. In their eyes, the things used by a noble old man must be better than the ordinary ones. The noble old man's bloodline was especially noble, so it naturally formed such a culture. Linton City, which had developed maritime trade, was slightly better. At the very least, the right of virginity had been abolished a few hundred years ago and had been changed to a marriage tax. That's right. In this world, marriage had to be taxed, and the amount was not low at all. It was almost equivalent to a farmer's hard-earned savings of 1 or 2 years. Basically, getting married once was equivalent to going bankrupt. The nobles of the Canteru Kingdom in the north still exercised this ancient right. However, this was not because they were greedy and lustful, but because there was a very superstitious idea among the ignorant farmers. It was that the blood of a virgin was a terrible curse that could only be broken by noble old men with noble blood. Therefore, the groom would prepare a generous gift on the day of the wedding, begging the local lord to serve his bride, and the lord would reluctantly have some intimate relations with the bride on account of the generous gift. If the bride was too ugly, they would even let their knights and servants do it for them. When he first heard this news, Andre thought that it was fabricated in the books, and specially went to ask Mayor Barlow and Merchant Laurent. In the end, there was only one answer from the two, and it was all true. Even the people of Lonely Mountain Town believed this. On the wedding night, the bride would often use her finger to break the membrane. It was simply foolish to the extreme. Just as there was a saying, humans were actually no different from other mammals. It was the accumulation of knowledge and experience that allowed us to develop a unique civilization. If we lost this, then the savagery, cruelty, and stupidity of humans would far exceed one's imagination. Under the guidance of a servant, Andre quickly arrived at the main hall. At the same time, he ordered the capstan above to turn, lower the drawbridge, and pull up the iron gate. As the heavy door slowly opened, he finally saw 6 women riding white horses not far in front of him. It had to be said that their current appearances were quite eye-catching. They wore beautiful silver-white winged helmets on their heads and silver-white half-body armor on their bodies. Even their gloves, boots, knee pads, and skirt armor were of the same color. It was unknown if the goddess of divine light, Lucia, had a special preference for white and silver. In short, the sunlight reflected from these ladies was so dazzling that it was hard to open one's eyes. Andre narrowed his eyes, avoiding the dazzling light, and bowed in an optimal manner. "Welcome, everyone. Please come in. I've already asked the servants to prepare tea and snacks. Let's talk while eating. Hee, since you've invited us, it would be impolite for us to refuse." Clarice jumped down from her horse, took off her helmet, ran her fingers through her hair, and waved to her companions behind her. "Come, sisters. Let's go in and rest for the night. We'll set off tomorrow morning. Are you sure you want to waste more than 10 hours resting here?" A relatively short woman also took off her helmet. It could be seen that she did not agree to rest for the night. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Another woman chimed in. "Tasia's worries are not unfounded. We're pressed for time. We have to return to Lincoln City at the end of this month. Moreover, we don't know how big the underground maze is. Shouldn't we try to buy more time?" "Don't worry, my dear sisters. According to the speed of the horse, we'll reach our destination in at most 4 days. Including the 4 days on the way back, we'll have at least 5 or 6 days to explore. That should be enough." Clarice led the way into the castle. The other 5 women looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders helplessly. They could only follow behind and step onto the suspension bridge. After all, the hierarchy within the church was very strict. For exploration activities like this, one thing was to determine the person in charge. No matter what decision she made along the way, as long as it did not go against kindness and order, everyone else had to follow her unconditionally. Otherwise, they would definitely be punished and reprimanded when they returned. Andre was a person who did not like to talk nonsense. After taking a seat, he exchanged a few simple pleasantries. Before the tea and snacks were served, he immediately asked, "Madam, I think you have to explain what's going on. After all, we have an agreement. You have to inform me 2 days before departure and send me information about the underground city." "Sorry, there's an accident." Clarice smiled helplessly and handed the helmet to the servant. She lowered her voice and explained, "You should know that the Green Sea Alliance is not very peaceful recently. Lincoln City is preparing for an emergency meeting to prepare for a new round of trade war. Therefore, the bishop wants us to end our other activities as soon as possible in order to deal with any changes that might occur. Since the situation is so tense, why don't we just give up on the exploration? It won't be too late to go after things have calmed down. After all, the underground city is just there. It won't escape." When they first met, Andre noticed that these people from the Church of the Goddess of Dawn were all in a hurry and seemed to be nervous. It was obvious that they had a special mission or mission. Could there be some big secret hidden in this? Although the clergy of the Goddess of Dawn were all of the good faction and would not do something that would harm their own teammates, he still wanted to know more about it so that he could take countermeasures in case something unexpected happened. Clarice subconsciously turned around and exchanged glances with her companions. Sighing slightly, she took out an ancient scroll made of parchment and gently placed it on the table. "Take a look. This is an ancient record found in the headquarters of the church. It tells a story from 1500 years ago. After reading it, you'll understand why our underground labyrinth is so important." With just a glance, Andre could tell that Clarice was not lying. The parchment was definitely more than 1,000 years old, and the words on it were not the common language of the continent that had only become popular in the last few hundred years. Instead, it was a very strange alphabet. Without any hesitation, he cast a rank 0 arcane spell, Reading Magic. In an instant, the unknown letters quickly rearranged themselves to form a long narrative poem. Chapter 207. Chandra, the former home of the Thunder Dwarves. It was the bright pearl of the underground world. It was the land of wealth that everyone dreamed of. Rich mineral veins and countless gems. Under the tempering of the Earth's core fire, the two became sharp weapons and sturdy armors. The city-states built by humans fought fiercely over these weapons, and the killing continued for generations. But the great Thunder Dwarf King Blotto was not satisfied. He desired to obtain more achievements to prove himself, just like those famous kings in history. Driven by ambition, Blotto suddenly ordered the craftsmen to use Chandra's treasure, the world's hardest meteorite, Cooley, to create a powerful magic weapon when he was 350 years old. After receiving the order, thousands of dwarven craftsmen worked day and night, using the Earth's core fire to hammer the meteorite that fell from the sky. It took a full 10 years to create the desired shape. In order to add powerful spells to this indestructible weapon, a total of 30 dwarven runemasters opened a door to another world, trying to inject endless energy into it. But they were far from aware of how dangerous the door they opened was. A terrifying creature silently passed through the passage and came to Chandra. The Thunder Dwarves knew nothing about this, because they were busy celebrating the creation of an unprecedentedly powerful weapon. The Dwarf King Blotto ordered the entire city to party. Limitless wine, delicious food, passionate and unrestrained dwarven girls. All the Thunder Dwarf had exhausted their last bit of energy in this sleepless night of revelry. By the time dawn arrived, all the other dwarves were drunk except for a few guards who were still guarding their posts. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the terrifying monsters have begun their silent slaughter. No one knew what methods it used, and no one knew how many people died. In short, when dawn came, the pearl of the underground world, the great city of the Thunder Dwarves, Chandra, had become a land of death. A huge shadow shrouded the sky above the city, and every dwarf that was killed was turned into the claws of evil. The terrifying evil was used on the surface, and the black clouds even covered the sky and the sun. The human city-states on the surface prayed to the beautiful goddess of dawn, Lucia, in despair. In the end, the benevolent goddess answered the prayer and sent down a bright light to drive the evil back to the underground and completely sealed the exit. However, the source of evil has not been destroyed. It has only been sealed away. That terrifying monster swore that one day it would break the seal, and then it would use blood and death to take revenge on the goddess. I am the only survivor of Chandra, the Thunder Dwarf Angel. I saw with my own eyes my family and friends turned into monsters after death. I saw the apocalyptic scene with my own eyes. I witnessed all this and warned the world to be wary of the terrifying monsters hidden in the underground. Although this was not the first time Andre had read a long narrative poem about monsters and disasters, he could not help but feel a chill from the bottom of his heart at this moment. As someone who had lived 2 lives, he could easily tell that the contents of this parchment were not forged. It was truly born more than 1,500 years ago, especially the dwarven words written on it. The grammar and rhetoric were completely different from now, and it was very tongue-twisting to read. Moreover, the age of the parchment indicated that it was from, so there was no need to doubt the contents recorded on it. It was obvious that the Church of the Goddess of Dawn was very clear about what was sealed in the underground city. Thus, the main purpose of this operation was to find the seal that was set up back then and see if there were any problems. After all, countless traps had been set up in that place, and most of them were related to magic. Thus, a wizard who understood the laws of arcane energy was necessary. After understanding everything, Andre threw the parchment that recorded the story on the table and asked while looking at the plan of the ruins, "So, our mission is to check the seal?" "That's right, this is the primary goal. But I'm afraid the process is not as simple as you think, because according to the conclusions of the adventurers, the temperature inside is so low that it's almost frozen. I believe that, as a wizard, you should understand what that means." Clarice replied with a serious expression. "The negative energy is seriously excessive? I don't think there's a second explanation other than a large number of undead entrenched there. It seems that if we want to enter the depths, we'll have to fight a fierce battle. I hope you have enough holy water." Saying this, Andre's mouth slightly raised, revealing a playful smile. "Sorry, I have to correct you. Our mission is not only to check the seal, but also to clean up all the monsters entrenched there, because the existence of these guys is a huge threat to the seal. As for the holy water, you don't have to worry about it. Every one of us has brought enough holy water, and the priest can also transform at any time. Even if there's a large group of vampires living there, I can guarantee that they'll all be purified." Tasia, who had a straight face from the beginning, couldn't stand the way the two were talking, so she poured out everything in one breath. There was no doubt that she was a typical impatient person. Although she looked very beautiful, she was an out-and-out fanatic in her bones. Andre, who had always flaunted himself as a gentleman, didn't show the slightest bit of anger because someone interrupted him. Instead, he smiled and spread out his hands. "No problem. I'm not in charge of fighting anyway." When we reached an agreement, we said that I'm only in charge of solving the magic puzzles and traps, and the church will be in charge of fighting. Clarice shrugged her shoulders indifferently. "Don't worry. The 6 of us will be in charge of all the fighting. When it comes to dealing with undead creatures, priests and paladins are far more powerful than mages." Saying this, she turned around and pointed to the companions sitting on her right. "This is Katarina. She's a 6th-level paladin. This is Elabella, a 7th-level priest. This is Tasia. I believe you already know her. She's a 4th-level warrior and a 4th-level priest. The 2 identical twins are Bridget and Daisy. The taller one is the younger one, and the shorter one is the older one. They're both warriors and priests. As for me, I'm a 9th-level priest, and I'm also in charge of this operation." Chapter 208. It's nice to meet you. Andre stood up and bowed politely. Just as he was about to say something, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from the staircase. A few seconds later, Crowley, dressed in battle attire, appeared at the staircase. He was panting as he wiped the sweat on his face and neck. With an excited expression, he asked, "Dear, I heard from the servants that you're going on an adventure." It was obvious that she had been practicing her swordsmanship and some special skills as a thief in the basement, so she looked a little embarrassed. Andre nodded. "Yes. Didn't I say some time ago that I'm going on a trip in the middle of this month to explore an ancient underground ruin? Now the time has come." "Wow, that's great." Chloe waved the rapier in her hand excitedly. Then she quickly put on a pitiful look and said coquettishly, "My dearest lover, you won't leave me alone to enjoy this adventure alone, will you?" "Huh." Andre was amused by the girl's appearance. He raised his hand and gently pinched her nose. "Stop fooling around. I'm afraid it won't work this time. You should have heard what these ladies said just now. Not only are there terrible undead in the underground maze, but there's also a terrible monster sealed there. I don't want anything to happen to you, so stay in the castle obediently. The leaders of this adventure are these ladies, and I'm just a consultant. No experienced adventurer team would take a newbie on a dangerous mission, even if the newbie was really very good. Because they were seriously inexperienced, they didn't know how to deal with crises and sudden situations. If they weren't careful, they could kill the whole team. Obviously, Chloe was such a newbie who could kill everyone. Although she was already a trainee bard, it was estimated that she hadn't even killed a single animal until now. Once she encountered a real battle, it would be difficult for her to display her true strength. From Andre's point of view, this noble girl still needed to be trained for a period of time before she would be dragged into the wilderness with the private army to wipe out the gnome tribes. At the very least, she needed to see some blood before anything else. However, he had clearly underestimated his fiancée's determination. Without any hesitation, Chloe stepped in front of Clarice and grabbed her hand. She winked playfully and said, "Esteemed madam, I am a devout believer of the goddess. I have always wanted to fight against those filthy and evil enemies. Do you think you could take me with you on this adventure?" "You?" Clarice raised her eyebrows and turned to stare at Andre. The latter stood there expressionlessly and gently shook his head. However, his hint didn't have any effect. After a playful smile appeared on Clarice's face, she directly took out her warhammer without saying a word. She walked to an open space and gently crooked her finger. "Come, use your sword to prove to me that you can be a qualified adventurer. Remember, you only have one chance. Please rest assured, madam, my sword will definitely not disappoint you." As he spoke, Crowley raised the rapier in his hand and performed a standard sword-bearing salute. With a leap, He stepped on the table and soared into the air, launching an attack at lightning speed. Her movements were so nimble and light that she stabbed towards her opponent's throat in a short moment. The sunlight shone in from the side of the window, caused the mithril mixed in the tip of the rapier to reflect a dazzling light. Everyone couldn't help but squint their eyes. It had to be said that this strike not only fully displayed the advantage of speed, but also perfectly used the surrounding environment. An ordinary person wouldn't even have a chance to dodge. It seemed that this pampered young lady had indeed obtained a very good result under the high-intensity training. She had fully avoided her lack of strength and stamina and displayed the word fast to the extreme. Seeing the dazzling blade coming closer and closer to her, Clarice didn't show any signs of panic. Instead, her eyes lit up and she shouted, "Come!" Following this shout, she suddenly leaned to the side and perfectly avoided the sharp tip of the rapier. She then swung the heavy warhammer and smashed it on the rapier. There was no surprise. Under the huge impact of the blunt weapon, the small rapier simply couldn't withstand it. In an instant, it showed an astonishing curve. From the degree of deformation, if it wasn't for the large amount of mithril mixed in, perhaps it would have broken into two. "Ah!" Chloe screamed. Her entire hand was numb from the shock. She almost lost her grip on the rapier and let it fall out of her hand. Because she had been fighting with a thief for a long time, she didn't know how to deal with heavy weapons, especially warhammers, axes, greatswords, warhammers, flails, and so on. She panicked for a moment. However, in the blink of an eye, it was too late. The young lady suddenly remembered a sentence that Liz had once said. In a real battle, never consider the so-called noble demeanor and righteousness. Use all the methods you know, or you will soon experience something 100 times more terrible than death. Although it wasn't a life-and-death battle, she was still quick-witted. She suddenly opened her mouth and let out an ear-piercing scream. Ah! This sound was so loud that it was obviously supported by the illusory sound spell. Clarice felt that her ears were about to be deafened. Her brain couldn't help but feel a little dizzy. Taking advantage of the moment when her opponent's attention was distracted, Chloe stabilized her trembling hand and rushed forward. She gradually pressed her sharp rapier against Clarice's throat and asked proudly, "Madam, do you think I'm a qualified adventurer now?" Your swordsmanship can only be said to be average, but your advantage is that your reaction is very fast. The timing of your spells is also very good. You can barely be considered a qualified adventurer. When you used arcane spells just now, you didn't seem to have any casting movements. If I'm not wrong, you must be a bard, right? Clarice didn't seem to have a sword pointed at her vital parts. She spoke with a smile on her face. In fact, she didn't even use her full strength. She didn't use any divine spells, nor did she use her armor. She didn't even use her shield, so she didn't care at all that she was defeated by a little girl. Everyone on the Lyle continent knew that the true strength of a priest was the divine spells bestowed by the gods. It was a completely different system from arcane spells, but it was still incomparably powerful. A priest who used divine spells and a priest who didn't were two completely different things. The former was only a relatively weak warrior, while the latter was a superhuman injected with hormones. Chapter 209. Chloe, who had never been scheming, nodded excitedly. That's right, I'm a bard. To her, this was the only opponent she had defeated after a month of rigorous training. Before this pitiful noble girl had been defeated by Liz time and time again. If it wasn't for the fact that she could see improvement every few days, her self-esteem might not have been able to take it. One had to know that the nobles of this world weren't weaklings who couldn't even truss up a chicken. Even the worst of the nobles were proficient in swordsmanship, horsemanship, arithmetic, and some other professional knowledge. Especially swordsmanship, everyone had undergone rigorous training, and even women were no exception. After all, monsters, beasts, and evil forces were endless, so the nobles hadn't abandoned the tradition of martial arts. Although Chloe was usually a little off the rails, her foundation in swordsmanship was quite good. Otherwise, She wouldn't have been able to improve so quickly in such a short period of time. Clarice obviously liked the girl's straightforwardness, and her eyes revealed a trace of a smile. Then you must have learned a song full of magic, right? Hee hee. Of course. My performance can make my companions more energetic and increase their immunity to mind magic. Chloe was now like a child who loved to show off. Her face was full of smiles as she spoke of her abilities one by one, as if she was afraid that others wouldn't know. Seeing this scene, Andre covered his face in shame. He was now a little regretful. He was so busy improving this noble girl's battle prowess that he forgot to teach her what it meant to be sinister. What a kind and simple child. Clarice reached out her hand and gently stroked Chloe's long hair. As the leader, I now announce that I agree to be a trainee member of this adventuring team. But before that, you still need a little education. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly attacked. One hand grabbed the girl's slender neck, while the other hand waved the warhammer, directly knocking away the sword against her neck. Chloe had never experienced such a scene before. For a moment, she was stunned on the spot. Her face was full of disbelief. Those two big blank eyes seemed to be asking, "Why are you doing this?" After completing the reversal, Clarice let go of her hand with a smile and kissed his forehead. Remember, child, don't show any mercy to your enemies. When you fight, you must ensure that you kill or severely injure your opponent. Otherwise, the one who dies is very likely to be you or your teammates. After saying this, she turned around and asked Andre, "Mr. Mage, I think it's all right for me to do this, right? You're the leader, so everything is up to you. But I need a guarantee. You should know what I want." At this point, Andre knew that it was too late to stop them, so he could only settle for the next best thing. This was because he had already seen the stars in Chloe's eyes. This noble girl whose head was filled with adventure stories was too addicted. Under the premise of ensuring her safety, perhaps it would be good to let her experience the difficulties of surviving in the wild and give up those unrealistic fantasies. Please don't worry. I don't think there will be too much danger in this exploration, and I won't use an official adventurer's contract on a girl either. If there is a crisis, you can take her and escape directly. Clarice smiled and made an irresistible offer. Ever since she found out that Chloe was a trainee bard, she had made up her mind to pull her into the team. The combination of her magical performance and divine spells would definitely greatly increase the team's combat strength. As for her swordsmanship, it didn't matter so much as long as she didn't drag the team down. Andre had long discovered the cleric's intentions, but seeing that the conditions were acceptable, he could only nod helplessly. "All right, I agree in principle, but she also has to have the right to share the spoils." Paladin Katerina, who had been silent all this time, suddenly stood up and bowed slightly with one hand on her chest. "Please don't worry. Our mission this time is to check whether the seal is intact or not, and to eliminate any threats that may appear in the vicinity. We don't need any spoils. If you like, you can have them all." Hearing this, Clarice's face instantly turned a little green. The corner of her mouth couldn't help but twitch, and her eyes were full of resentment. "You are indeed a noble person. Please allow me to express my most sincere gratitude to you and the great goddess for your generosity. As the saying goes, if you don't take advantage of an opportunity, you're a bastard." Andre didn't even think about it and directly decided on this matter. Perhaps he would feel pity for ordinary civilians, but for these temples and churches that had extorted a large amount of gold coins from him, there was no way he could be merciful. In any case, the other party was already rich enough, and he didn't have any psychological burden at all to take advantage of them. Today, he finally understood why in countless books, words such as noble, holy, righteous, selfless, and so on were used to describe the Saint Sarai. It was as if these guys were the embodiment of kindness and justice. It was simply laughable. It turned out that the author of the book was not wrong at all. All the treasures that could possibly appear in an ancient underground maze were given away so easily without any bargaining or hesitation. It was as if wealth was a sin and a burden to her. From beginning to end, her expression didn't change in the slightest. In the whole of Oraire, there was probably no profession more special than a paladin. This was because it was completely different from other professions that required learning and training. Paladins used a powerful force called inspiration to turn an intelligent being into a guardian of kindness and order. All paladins had to abide by three basic principles, which are the passion for pursuing the ultimate good, the will to uphold the law, and the power to repel evil. It could be said that everyone who could become a paladin was an out-and-out good person, and they were willing to lend a helping hand to anyone who needed help, even if the price was their own life. No matter if it was a beggar with a festering body or an enchanting noblewoman, they were all treated equally. Money was like dirt to them. When they joined the adventure team, they were often the ones who contributed the most and bled the most, but they never cared about the reward. Sometimes, they would even donate all their savings generously. To some extent, these guys were the most glorious embodiment of human nature. Their existence made the whole world a better place. At least when the disadvantaged were bullied, the first thing they would think of was to look for paladins. This showed how noble they were in the hearts of the people. Chapter 2:10. Unfortunately, there were too few paladins. They were one of the rarest among all the professions. There were only 6 paladins in the whole of Lincoln City, and Katarina was one of them. The remaining 5 mostly chose to serve the gods of the good faction, often appearing on the front lines against evil and conspiracies. Every day, she was the first to wake up and the last to sleep. She would pray twice before the sun rose and set. She would even wait until everyone was full before putting the leftovers into her bowl. In just a few days, she had displayed the noble soul of a paladin. The other party's actions made Andre feel a sense of shame that he had never felt before. He had thought that after living 2 lives, his skin had long been tempered to the point of being invulnerable. As long as there was a need, even if it was an ugly woman, he would still be able to say mushy words of love. Unfortunately, he had forgotten what it meant to feel ashamed. In front of a saint with almost no flaws in her morals, as long as there was still a trace of kindness left in his heart, it would instantly trigger the shame hidden in the bottom of his heart. Furthermore, he was not considered a bad person. After all, since transmigrating to Orire, he had not done a single bad thing. On the contrary, he had done a lot of good things. Otherwise, his faction would not be neutral and good. Seeing Andre's conflicted expression, Clarice, who was sitting next to the bonfire, held back her laughter and pretended to be serious as she asked, "Dear Mr. Mage, how does it feel to be interrogated by your conscience?" As a priest with sharp senses, she had long noticed the change in Roland's emotions not long after he left the castle. From the initial smugness to uneasiness, and now to the current guilt, it was a perfect illustration of the paladin's powerful charisma. Revenge is not something a good priest should do. Andre pursed his lips and picked up a wooden spoon to stir the broth in the pot. Since 2 days ago, after tasting the terrible cooking of these women, he had taken the initiative to take on the role of chef to prevent himself from getting diarrhea and food poisoning before reaching the destination. Otherwise, he would probably be tortured to death by the terrible food before he even reached the destination. Once again, it was proven that most women's looks and cooking skills were inversely proportional. For those beautiful women, beauty was their greatest weapon. Not to mention, the women in the team were not only beautiful, but also had powerful fighting strength. Therefore, it was inevitable that their cooking skills were not good. I'm not taking revenge. I'm guiding a lost soul into the embrace of the goddess. If I'm not mistaken, you haven't found your faith yet, have you? Clarice asked with a curious look on her face. Madam, I repeat, please do not try to preach to me again. I believe you know best what kind of attitude mages have towards gods and religions. Just give up. After saying that, Andre no longer paid any attention to the female priest's thirsty eyes. He took out a bag of salt and sprinkled it into the pot. Then he scooped up a little with a spoon, blew on it gently, and took a small sip. The taste was just right. In fact, similar probing and roping had been carried out no less than 10 times in just 2 days. What made his head hurt even more was that the other party patiently explained the so-called doctrines of kindness and hope. It was simply like pointing at an annoying fly and buzzing in his ear. Of course, the only saving grace was that this fly was very beautiful and not too annoying. But a fly was a fly. No matter how much he added, it would not change the nature of fly. As a person who had received more than 20 years of materialistic education, Andre could never become a qualified believer. This was because he had no respect for the gods, even if the gods in this world were real. On the contrary, he had an impulse to want to know what kind of creatures the gods were. As everyone knew, the more advanced the information technology was, the more curious people would be. When the ancient magic civilization was at its most prosperous, the legendary mages had even researched the secrets of the immortality of the gods. It was also because of this that they were completely destroyed by the gods later on. Andre had read about this history in books. Therefore, he had always kept a respectful distance from the temple. He knew that he, who came from Earth, was actually no different from those arrogant legendary mages. He did not believe that the gods loved the people. He was more eager to catch a god and pull out their tendons and skin them alive to study whether they were aliens or something else. After all, the few times that the gods had appeared in the ancient books, they were all like human-shaped nuclear bombs. They could turn plains into mountains and deserts into seas. They were simply omnipotent. Lightning, wind, fire, plants, animals. There was almost nothing that was not under their control. Who would believe that creatures with such power would fight over a group of humans that they could pinch to death with a stretch of their hand? It was like a person standing at the entrance of an anthole looking at ants. Perhaps when he was in a good mood, he would throw some food to the ants. But if he was in a bad mood, it would be a disaster for the ants. Perhaps the gods were like a group of people who had discovered an anthole. Some of them were kind, some of them were neutral, and some of them were thirsty for blood and killing. They squatted in front of the anthole and had different opinions. Some hoped to give the ants some help. Some thought that the ants were too much of an eyesore and that it would be best to kill them all. As for the remaining ones, they hoped to not interfere with the ants and let them develop on their own. In Andre's eyes, the gods of this world were a group of high and mighty people, and the intelligent races living on the continent were countless ants. He did not believe that higher beings would have any love for lower beings. Even if they did, it would be a kind of mutated sympathy. Why can't mages use faith? Many mages in Linton City have become believers of the gods. Although their devotion needs to be tested, I think this is a very good start. The goddess once taught us that any power must be restrained. Power without restraint is dangerous and uncontrollable. It will bring unimaginable disaster to the whole world. Clarice did not have the slightest intention of giving up. She was still talking about the contents of the scripture. She obviously wanted to take advantage of the fact that Andre was still underage to change his mind and fight for a promising spellcaster for the church. However, she did not know that this youth who looked to be only 14 or 15 years old had already lived 2 lifetimes. Otherwise, he would have already picked up his mace and started killing people. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.